Chapter 712. The Thunder Emperor glared at Tang Zheng and gnashed his teeth. We're not finished. After that, he turned around and left with his subordinates. Su Yingtian looked at the other party's departing figure with ridicule. When the other party was far away, his face sank. The dragon group is becoming more and more unrestrained. They even dared to touch a consultant from the National Security Bureau. Tang Zheng relaxed and asked, "It seems that there have been many changes in the country recently?" Su Yingtian bitterly smiled and shook his head. "It's a long story. Let's leave this place first." The group left the departure hall in a grandiose manner and took several cars to a military cargo plane in the airport. The military plane roared as it flew into the blue sky. Only then did the group feel slightly relieved. Su Yingtian looked at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze and asked with a solemn expression, "Now you can tell me what you did in the island nation. I'm all ears." Tang Zheng gently caressed Xiaobai. He had already removed the illusion on Xiaobai. Xiaobai was lying on his lap and didn't care about the curious gazes of others. Tang Zheng organized his words and spoke. This time he didn't hide the news of Wu Junshan's group. After all, the Li Palace already knew about this matter. It wasn't easy to hide it from the government. As expected, Su Yingtian wasn't surprised when he heard the news of Wu Junshan's group. Clearly he already knew about this matter. Furthermore, a trace of gratification flashed across his face. However, when he heard that the Li Palace had colluded with the island nation and betrayed Wu Junshan's group, Su Yingtian's face sank. Almost everyone in Wuxia, including those in the government, didn't have a good impression of the island nation. This was because of history. The Li Palace had actually colluded with the island nation to harm Wu Junshan's group. This was truly infuriating. After all, Wu Junshan's group was a part of Wuxia. This was equivalent to colluding with the enemy and harming their own people. However, there were too many factors involved. Su Yingtian didn't immediately express his opinion. In the end, when he heard the inside story of the Yamato no Orochi and the war decades ago, Su Yingtian couldn't sit still any longer. He slapped the armrest of the chair, shattering it into pieces. Tang Zheng had already expected that he would have this kind of reaction. Any Chinese person with a bit of courage would have the same reaction after hearing the truth. Damn Japanese, so they actually concocted such a big scheme and even killed so many Chinese compatriots. Su Yingtian angrily roared. Tang Zheng calmly said, "Now that you know the truth, how do you evaluate my actions in the island nation?" Su Yingtian was startled. He understood the meaning of Tang Zheng's words. His expression was somewhat complicated as he sighed. "As an official, I obviously don't want you to do such an extreme thing. But as a Wuxia person, I can't help but clap my hands in joy. What you've done is too damn satisfying." Su Yingtian heavily slapped Tang Zheng's shoulder and continued, "Although I'm an official, I'm first and foremost a Wuxia person. Those people in the Imperial Advisor's residence and the Imperial Palace all deserve to die. They should die without a burial site." Tang Zheng looked at him with gratification and said, "I didn't misjudge you." Su Yingtian revealed a bitter smile and sighed, "The new generation excels the old. The secret of decades has been discovered by you. Humph, let's see how the island nation can be arrogant now." Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. The island nation must have already found out my identity, so they're pressuring the country, right? Su Yingtian nodded his head. The island nation's attitude is firm, so they're under a lot of pressure. What do they want? Of course they want us to hand you over. Otherwise, why would the Dragon Group send so many people to capture you? But the Dragon Group isn't the only one in the country. There are still many righteous and unyielding people. Tang Zheng recalled the scene from before and curiously asked, "Why did the Dragon Group suddenly compromise?" "Because I invited a big shot to reject the Dragon Group's previous proposal." Su Yingtian pretended to be mysterious as he said, "Big shot?" "Oh." Tang Zheng curiously asked. Su Yingtian laughed and purposely kept him in suspense. "This is a secret for now. You'll naturally know when you see him." Tang Zheng was filled with suspicion as he looked out the window and asked, "I forgot to ask you, where are we going?" "Of course it's the capital. Didn't you buy a ticket to go to the capital?" "Alright, then I'd like to see who this big shot you're talking about is." Tang Zheng did not ask further. The plane whistled through the clouds. In just a few hours, the plane landed at a military airport on the outskirts of the capital. An off-road vehicle carrying Tang Zheng, Wu, and Su Yingtian sped towards the center of the city. Looking at the familiar scenery and streets outside the window, the weather was already hot. The streets were filled with people wearing cool clothes, and the beauties began to reveal their slender snow-white thighs, attracting the men's gazes. The off-road vehicle drove straight into the center of the capital. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted as he stared at the building in front of him. This building was not tall, but rather it was a little short in the capital that was filled with tall buildings. However, as a person from Wuxia, no one dared to look down on this place. This place was much more powerful than those skyscrapers because this represented the center of Wuxia's power. Any Wuxia person who came here couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive or even reverent. Even Tang Zheng was no exception. After all, he was a secular person who had received more than 10 years of traditional education. Even though his strength had greatly increased in the past year and he had experienced many major events, some of the genes hidden in his bones could not be changed in a short period of time. On the other hand, Wu was unperturbed. He glanced outside and then closed his eyes to rest. Even his mood did not fluctuate in the slightest. Power in her eyes was really ephemeral. She had been taught to despise secular power since she was young. This was a world of difference from Tang Zheng. As if sensing his mood, Su Yingtian said, "Don't be nervous, there are also people living here. Moreover, in terms of individual strength, you are stronger than any of them." Tang Zheng revealed a wry smile, took a deep breath, suppressed the fear in his heart and said, "It's my first time here, so it's difficult to avoid the customs." Su Yingtian chuckled in satisfaction at Tang Zheng's bluntness and said, "The first time I came here, I was even more nervous than you. My hands were trembling, and my legs were almost unable to take a step. In the end, when I went back, I found that my vest was full of sweat, and my clothes were as if they had been fished out of the water." "Is it that exaggerated?" Tang Zheng sneered. Although he was in awe of the power here, it was not to that extent. "It's not exaggerated at all. I'm still considered good. There are people who are so weak that they can't even walk. Your condition is already very good," Su Yingtian praised. After hearing his words, Tang Zheng's remaining trace of nervousness gradually disappeared. He loosened his shoulders, and instead felt a kind of unprecedented ease. Seeing his change, Su Yingtian's eyes flashed with a strange light. He secretly praised him. A dragon among men, as expected, extraordinary. This change was far from what an ordinary person could compare to. The off-road vehicle passed through a strict inspection and passed through a series of armed guards before finally entering the central area of this power center. Most of the buildings here were courtyards or 2- or 3-story buildings. These buildings were hidden in the greenery. Although there was already a trace of summer in the sky, when one was in this space, one's whole body was emitting a cool feeling. A cool breeze brushed past one's face, and it was incomparably comfortable. The few of them got out of the car, and Su Yingtian led the 2 people and 1 beast into one of the courtyards with ease. Tang Zheng could not help but size up. The Ye family's residence in the capital was also a courtyard, and it occupied a larger area than this courtyard. However, Tang Zheng felt that this courtyard was far more formidable than the Ye family's, especially the few powerful auras in the dark, which made Tang Zheng's heart involuntarily tremble a few times. What a tight security force! Tang Zheng secretly praised. The security here was even tighter than the imperial palace of the island nation. Although there were many masters in the imperial palace, there were very few true masters. However, judging from the auras that Tang Zheng felt just now, there were definitely no less than 3 masters. The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth raised. They had really mobilized a lot of people. Were they afraid that they would not be able to control him and prevent him from harming people? But on second thought he was relieved. If any one of the people living here had an accident, it would be a major event no less than an earthquake for the country of Wuxia. It would affect the development and strategy of the entire country and affect thousands of families. Indeed, they couldn't be careless. Of course, from the difference in the strength of the guards, it could be seen that Wuxia's foundation was far from what the island nation could compare to. What was extremely laughable was that the island nation still did not give up and tried to start a war with Wuxia again. Wu Yu and Xiaobai need to stay in this room for the time being. The few of them entered a small room and Su Yingtian said solemnly. At this moment, his brows were filled with the seriousness of official business. When Wu heard this, he immediately frowned and looked towards Tang Zheng. "I want to bring Tang Zheng to see an important figure. He's the only one, I don't have the authority to bring anyone else in," Su Yingtian said honestly. Wu still did not say anything, but his brows were knitted tighter and tighter. The atmosphere was somewhat tense. Tang Zheng roughly guessed Su Yingtian's thoughts and said, "Wu Yu and Xiaobai stay here, I'll be back soon." When Wu heard this, his brows immediately relaxed, and his eyes became gentle, like a pool of autumn water, causing Su Yingtian to be speechless. When did Wu become so docile and obedient? He looked deeply at Tang Zheng. How many more surprises would this brat give him? Tang Zheng and Su Yingtian walked out together, passed through a courtyard and arrived at a study room. They knocked on the door and entered, and a room full of books greeted their eyes. Although it was Tang Zheng's first time here, he could clearly feel that the books on the bookshelves were definitely not used as decorations to show off, but were frequently flipped through. It could be seen how astonishing the reading volume of the owner of this place was. Chapter 7:13. This back view often appeared on television news and in various news reports. Most of the citizens had a deep impression of it. Tang Zheng was no exception. Although the other party had yet to turn around, Tang Zheng had already guessed his identity. He couldn't help but be stunned. Why was he here to see him? Who was this person? It was the person who had a meeting with Su Yingtian, Xing Feng, and the others some time ago. He was one of the people at the top of the power pyramid in Wuxia, the bureau chief of the central government, an absolute big shot. Compared to him, all the officials rumored to be in charge of the borders were insignificant. Hearing the footsteps, the bureau chief turned around. His bright and imposing gaze swept past Tang Zheng. He nodded without batting an eyelid and said, "Heroes come from the young. It's true that heroes come from the young. You've done such a big thing at such a young age." Although his words were good, there was a hint of reproach in them. Su Yingtian was an old hand in the bureaucracy. How could he not tell? His heart couldn't help but skip a beat as he thought to himself, "This is bad." Tang Zheng didn't think about the deeper meaning of the other party's words. His expression didn't change. Although the other party's identity was out of Tang Zheng's expectations, the respect he had when he first came in had unknowingly disappeared. He said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Thank you for the compliment. This is what I should do." Clearly, he didn't think that what he had done in the island nation was wrong. He took the other party's words as genuine praise. Hearing that, the bureau chief's thick brows immediately furrowed. His gaze turned sharp as he stared straight at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was also someone who had been through a lot. The bureau chief's halo was useful to ordinary people, but not to Tang Zheng. Therefore, Tang Zheng calmly looked straight into the bureau chief's eyes. Their gazes met and the study was terrifyingly silent. The air seemed to have frozen. Su Yingtian's breathing was almost out of control. He rolled his eyes and lamented to himself, "Why did I forget to give Tang Zheng a heads up just now? This is too rash and will only backfire." But at this moment he had no way of reminding Tang Zheng. The corner of Su Yingtian's mouth twitched a few times. He tasted bitterness in his mouth, but there was nothing he could do. What should I do? You actually feel that it's quite glorious?" The bureau chief didn't seem to approve of Tang Zheng's attitude. Tang Zheng said calmly, "Of course, killing the enemy is part of our duty. Moreover, the other party has committed many crimes in Wuxia. This is just the interest collected from them." "That's an old story. Is that so? You think you can forget the past just because you're an adult? History is meant to be remembered, not forgotten." Tang Zheng wasn't afraid in the slightest and said firmly. Su Yingtian's jaw almost dropped to the ground. He really wanted to rush up and cover Wang Zheng's mouth, praying that he would stop talking nonsense. History is meant to be remembered, not forgotten. The bureau chief's expression changed slightly as he repeated this sentence. He looked at Tang Zheng with a hint of approval in his eyes. Today's society was too impetuous. Everyone was looking forward and risking their lives for money and status. There were very few people who had this kind of awareness of the big picture or this kind of spirit. Without a doubt, Tang Zheng's words touched the bureau chief. But the bureau chief didn't give up. He still said in a deep voice, "But everything has to be done in a certain way. If you mess around like this, you will only end up in a passive position and disrupt the established steps." Tang Zheng didn't give in at all. He said stubbornly, "But sometimes the arrow has to be shot. Island Nation has two malignant tumors, Yamato no Orochi and the Imperial Tutor's residence. If we don't get rid of them, there will be endless troubles in the future." Imperial Tutor's residence, Yamato no Orochi? The bureau chief frowned. He was no stranger to the Imperial Tutor's residence. After all, the National Security Bureau had a lot of information on the Imperial Tutor's residence. But it was the first time he heard of Yamato no Orochi. Tang Zheng didn't answer. Instead he looked at Su Yingtian. Su Yingtian understood tacitly. He knew that Tang Zheng wanted him to introduce the situation and give him the opportunity to show his face. He couldn't help but feel grateful. He quickly organized his words and introduced the situation of Yamato no Orochi. As expected, the bureau chief and Su Yingtian had the same reaction. Especially when it came to the conspiracy of the war decades ago, his eyes were obviously burning with anger. Seeing that ball of anger, Tang Zheng was secretly relieved. If the country's leader could still maintain this sense of pride and honor for history, then this country had a lot of hope. There's such a thing? It was the bureau chief's first time hearing about this inside story. He stared at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng nodded seriously. I can guarantee the authenticity of this information. The bureau chief nodded seriously and looked at Su Yingtian. Su Yingtian had an idea and said, then we can use this to change the situation this time. Obviously he wanted to use this to make a fuss. After all, the island nation was already putting pressure on Wuxia to make Wuxia hand over Tang Zheng. The bureau chief also saw through Su Yingtian's thoughts. He didn't comment. Tang Zheng did not care about what the two of them were thinking and said to himself, I haven't finished speaking yet. This is only a part of the news. There is another piece of news that is even more important. I think you guys are more interested in hearing it. What? My guess is that the 8-headed serpent has already been subdued by the 100 Transformation Star Lord. These two fellows are together, colluding with each other. The consequences will be extremely terrifying, and it is definitely not something you want to see. Tang Zheng said in a heavy tone. Actually, he didn't want to see this result either. Although this news hadn't been confirmed, he completely believed it. 100 Faces Star Lord. The bureau chief's eyelids twitched and his expression changed slightly. His big reaction was enough to show the magic power of the name 100 Faces Star Lord. Back then, what happened in the 100,000 Mountains was not a secret. The government had already inquired about most of it through various channels. Later on, they even sent elite troops to barge into the 100,000 Mountains, but without exception they were all annihilated. Among them, the scattered news that was sent back was that 100 Faces Star Lord was very terrifying. The 100,000 Mountains had become the territory of monsters, and those who barged in would definitely die. After countless failures and sacrifices, the government finally gave up on the idea of sending people into the 100,000 Mountains. But the name 100 Faces Star Lord was like a nightmare. It spread among the upper echelons of power, and the few big bosses heard it like thunder. Su Yingtian also looked at Tang Zheng in shock. After hearing this news, his heart couldn't help but beat faster. 100 Faces Star Lord had already made them helpless. If Yamato no Orochi was added, it would definitely be a huge disaster. Then wouldn't they immediately attack us? Su Yingtian asked in a hoarse voice. Tang Zheng had also been thinking about this problem. After a few days of thinking, he rejected this idea. He shook his head and said, no. What? The other two looked at Tang Zheng curiously, as they were curious about this answer that was out of their expectations. Because they have a bigger plan. My intuition is that they won't act rashly before this plan succeeds. This was the conclusion that Tang Zheng came to from 100 Faces Star Lord's reaction of biding his time for such a long time. He believed in his own results. Bigger plan? What's that? Tang Zheng didn't intend to reveal this news at first. But after seeing the bureau chief he changed his mind. Perhaps letting the government know this news would be more effective in stopping 100 Faces Star Lord's plan. Use the Mountain River blood sacrifice array formed by tens of thousands of people to bring the Devil Clan back to this world, Tang Zheng said in a deep voice. Swoosh swoosh. As soon as this was said, the two of them changed their expressions. They were no stranger to the term Devil Clan. They knew what the Devil Clan represented. They represented slaughter and blood. If the Devil Clan descended, then this world would really be finished. The bureau chief couldn't help but grab Tang Zheng's hand and ask, will the Devil Clan really descend to this world? Tang Zheng said honestly, it's possible as long as 100 Faces Star Lord's plan succeeds. That Mountain River blood sacrifice array? Yes, this formation is extremely bloody and vicious. It requires the lives and blood of tens of thousands of people as a catalyst to activate the formation and bring the Demon Clan back from the skies beyond. Tang Zheng's voice couldn't help but become heavy. He couldn't imagine what would happen to this world after the Devil Clan descended. How do we stop him? The bureau chief asked directly. Use all the information we have to search for the missing people in various places and stop 100 Faces Star Lord from finding so many victims. Su Yingtian asked worriedly, will it work? Tang Zheng wasn't very confident. He said helplessly, do your best and leave the rest to fate. Oh, how can this world be destroyed by 100 Faces Star Lord? We can't be so lucky. What do you mean do your best and leave the rest to fate? That's too negative. We have to deal with it actively. Su Yingtian, I give you full authority to mobilize any resources to investigate the entire country. We can't neglect any missing people. We have to investigate to the end. The bureau chief gave a strict order. Yes. Su Yingtian straightened his body and said passionately. He couldn't hide the excitement between his brows. During the last meeting he was almost in despair. Tang Zheng's actions caused the country to be in a passive position. Furthermore, with Xing Feng fanning the flames, his situation became even worse. Many people even directly sentenced his career and life to death. But he didn't give up. He finally convinced the bureau chief to meet Tang Zheng. He even brought Tang Zheng over personally. Fortunately, he arrived in time and stopped the conflict between Tang Zheng and the Dragon Group. Otherwise, when the bureau chief heard about the conflict between Tang Zheng and the Dragon Group, he would have given up on meeting Tang Zheng. There wouldn't have been so many things that followed. Su Yingtian heaved a sigh of relief. But he didn't show it. His face was still serious. Tang Zheng didn't know that his unintentional actions had a positive impact on the country. And it was a positive impact that affected thousands of families. Originally, the problem of human trafficking in the country was not stopped. But because the country increased its efforts to investigate missing people, many missing people were found in time and reunited with their families. There were many women and children among them. Chapter 7:14. The bureau chief looked at Tang Zheng sternly and asked, "As a cultivator, you have a special identity. Do you have any suggestions?" Tang Zheng's heart moved, and he asked the question that had been buried in his heart for a long time. How does the country view cultivators? Su Yingtian sucked in a breath of cold air. This question was too direct. The bureau chief was calm and said, "Cultivators and martial artists are the same. They are also part of society. A few hundred years ago, cultivators were expelled. That was because people were limited by their knowledge and experience. Now that technology is advanced, many things are different. Cultivators can also exist in this world like martial artists." Tang Zheng was happy. It seemed that the government's attitude towards cultivators was much more open-minded. They didn't just suppress them. However, cultivators are too special. Or rather, they are too powerful. If too many of them exist in this world, there will be many problems. The bureau chief added. Tang Zheng's head thumped. It was as if a bucket of cold water was poured on his head. His excitement was extinguished. He smiled bitterly. He was too naive. He really thought that the government would accept all cultivators. At least with the current situation it was impossible. Greater than or equal to cultivators were too powerful. Especially Tang Zheng's action this time, the government had directly witnessed the power of cultivators. Cultivators were like nuclear bombs. They were very powerful. If they were within a controlled range, they would be beneficial to the country. If they were completely out of control, they would definitely be a very unstable factor. That was to say, if a small number of cultivators existed, the country wouldn't interfere too much. If they allowed a large number of cultivators to return, the government wouldn't sit by and do nothing. Of course, there was another layer of meaning in the bureau chief's words. Tang Zheng also figured it out. The bureau chief emphasized on technology. That was to say, it wasn't a few hundred years ago. The government had no way to deal with cultivators. The power of technology couldn't be underestimated. Not to mention nuclear bombs, the mecha developed by the Dragon Group couldn't be underestimated. There were also super soldiers. No one could be sure that super soldiers wouldn't be weaker than cultivators in the future. Also, super soldiers could be mass-produced. That would be a very terrifying force. The bureau chief's words were a combination of kindness and authority, which gave Tang Zheng a lot of insights. However, he was not as enthusiastic as Tian Chanzi about the return of the large group of cultivators. He had already determined that if the large group of cultivators returned, it would not be of much benefit to the ordinary people. What he considered was not the stability of the regime, but the benefits to the general public. Both sides had different starting points, but they could be considered to have reached the same conclusion. Thus, Tang Zheng solemnly nodded and said, "Cultivators will not harm the country, but I hope that the country will not judge people with colored glasses, or sooner or later there will be problems." As soon as he said this, Su Yingtian's back was drenched in sweat. These words were too bold. It was equivalent to threatening the other party, telling the government not to go too far. Otherwise, the cultivators would also resist. No one had ever dared to say such things in front of the chief. Su Yingtian was secretly anxious for Tang Zheng. Newborn calves were not afraid of tigers. The bureau chief looked at Tang Zheng with burning eyes. Their eyes met, and after a long time, the bureau chief took the initiative to reach out his hand and simply said, "Okay." The two hands tightly held together, and it could be considered that they had reached a preliminary consensus. Su Yingtian brought Tang Zheng out of the study and said in a low voice, You are so bold. You scared me to death just now. I almost had a heart attack. Tang Jing smiled indifferently. Is it so exaggerated? Of course. You don't know, but if there is really a disagreement, there are countless experts in the dark who are not to be trifled with. Su Yingtian said with a bitter smile. I am not to be trifled with either. Tang Jing said quietly. If the other party really wanted to kill him, he would not sit still and wait for death. In the end, it was still unknown who would emerge victorious. If Su Yingtian knew his true thoughts, he would probably be so scared that he would hide far away. Seeing Tang Jing's disapproving expression, Su Yingtian only hoped to bring them away from this place as soon as possible. Suddenly, a person walked in front of them. The two of them were startled, and their expressions became somewhat unsightly. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. They actually met Xingfeng here. Xingfeng strode towards the two of them and stopped in front of them. He coldly looked at Tang Jing and said, This time, consider yourself lucky. You managed to get away with it. Tang Jing looked at the other party in ridicule and said, Xingfeng, to be honest, when I first saw you, I really did not expect that you would have today. Otherwise, when we were in Dianan, you would have died long ago. Xingfeng's pupils shrank and said, I still have to thank you. If not for you, I would not have today's achievements. This was the truth. Back then, Xingfeng was just a general in the army in Dianan. He still had to look up to Long Xinyuan. But now, he was the leader of the dragon group, and the power of the Long family was no longer a threat to him. Then we will meet again. Let's see who will have the last laugh. Tang Jing did not waste time with the other party and directly said it out loud. Then let's wait and see. Xingfeng coldly snorted, walked past the two of them and strode away. Turning his head to look at his back, Tang Jing frowned and said, The chief summoned him? Su Yingtian sighed and said, The situation of the Dragon Group and the National Security Bureau as equals has already formed. Especially this time, the Dragon Group was one step ahead of the National Security Bureau in reporting the island nation's information, causing the National Security Bureau to be very passive. The Dragon Group is in the limelight. I've implicated you. Tang Jing patted Su Yingtian's shoulder. What's there to be polite about? My point of view is the same as yours. The Dragon Group won't be able to jump around for long, especially since Xingfeng is too high profile. Furthermore, he has the final say in the Dragon Group. The two of them returned to the hut, picked up Wu and Xiao Bai, and left this heavily guarded place together. When they were about to part ways, Su Yingtian pulled Tang Jing and asked in a low voice, I still have a question in my heart. Where did you place Wu Junshan and the others? Wu Junshan and the others were a force that could not be underestimated, but it was as if they had disappeared from the face of the earth. Tang Jing smiled mysteriously and did not answer. He held Wu's hand and quickly disappeared in front of Su Yingtian's eyes. Su Yingtian shook his head. There was nothing he could do. In the same study room, the head sat on a chair behind the desk. Xingfeng carefully sat on the sofa and looked at the head in awe. The Li Palace has already sent back news. The Li Palace master has already explained the matter of the island nation. This is only a personal grudge between the Li Palace and Wu Junshan and the others. It does not involve the country, so they used the power of the island nation. Before this, they did not know about the matter of the Yamata no Orochi. It turned out that before Tang Jing could say the truth, the Li Palace had already contacted the Dragon Group and explained the matter of the island nation. They wanted to remove the Li Palace from this matter and reduce the country's hostility towards the Li Palace. Hearing this, the head's face turned cold. Personal grudge, humph. Xingfeng's heart thumped. The head was really angry. The actions of the Li Palace were contrary to the country's wishes. It was truly infuriating. Head, I believe that the Li Palace master is not someone who does not know how to adapt to the situation. He would not do such a disgraceful thing as colluding with the enemy. Although he knew that the other party was angry, Xingfeng still had to bite the bullet and explain for the Li Palace. The head coldly looked at Xingfeng. Xingfeng hurriedly lowered his head and said, The Dragon Group has conducted a detailed investigation of the Li Palace. What they said should be true. Furthermore, the Dragon Group has already begun to infiltrate the Li Palace. In time, this mysterious force will also be used by the country. The Dragon Group infiltrated the Li Palace. Xingfeng really dared to do something that had never happened before. The bureau chief glanced at Xingfeng with gratification. Xingfeng had many shortcomings, but there was one thing that Su Yingtian couldn't compare to. Su Yingtian's thinking was much more rigid, while Xingfeng was very daring and would often do many unexpected things. The infiltration this time was one of them, and it had enlightened the higher-ups. The few large organizations were impenetrable, and they were not controlled by the government. This made the government very passive. If this continued, it was hard to guarantee that nothing would happen in the future. Xing Feng's suggestion was exactly what the higher-ups wanted. That was why they valued him more and more. They even turned a blind eye to the fact that he had the final say in the dragon group. The head's expression finally looked better. He nodded approvingly and said, "Follow up on this matter closely." "Yes." Xing Feng hesitated for a while, then said hesitantly, "Tang Zheng's matter? Put aside your feud with Tang Zheng for now. Tang Zheng is a force that can be won over." The head had made his judgment. Even if Xing Feng had thousands of words to say, there was nothing he could do. "Understood." Xing Feng accepted the order dejectedly. "How's the progress on the Tree of Life?" the head asked. Xing Feng said dejectedly, "There's no progress. This is all Tang Zheng's fault. I don't know what method he used, but we can't even get close to the Tree of Life. He has ulterior motives." Xing Feng seemed to have found another entry point to attack Tang Zheng. But before he could finish, he was interrupted by the head. "This matter needs to be considered at length. The research on the Tree of Life cannot be stopped, but we can't become enemies with Tang Zheng because of this." Xing Feng's words were blocked again. It was as if someone was strangling his throat. There was nothing he could do. Tang Zheng didn't know how many times he had been on the verge of danger. He was almost killed by Xing Feng's scheming. He returned home with Marshall. But when he opened the door, he wondered if he had walked into the wrong house. Was this still his home? He didn't dare to admit it. His home in the past wasn't bad, but it was completely different from what he saw now. His home now was like a palace. Although it was a two-bedroom room, the smell was completely different. It was completely renovated and decorated. There were all kinds of decorations. Even Tang Zheng, a layman, could tell that it wasn't ordinary. Of course, he didn't know that these materials, furniture, and decorations were all flown over from Sweden. The renovation cost was more than the price of buying this house. Marshall also looked at everything in front of her in disbelief and said, "Did we go the wrong way?" Chapter 7:15. Tang Zheng and Wu strode in. Since they didn't go wrong, they couldn't just enter and not enter. Wu looked around curiously. She had to admit that Princess Anne's taste was indeed extraordinary. Even someone like her, who didn't know anything about decorations, could see the extraordinary charm. Tang Zheng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "If I were to come back in a while, I'm afraid this place would have become a real palace." Wu said with a gloomy face, "This kind of woman is really powerful." "What's so great about that?" "This is the education she received since she was young, just like how you know martial arts." Tang Jing said disapprovingly. "Really?" "Of course." Dong dong dong. While they were talking, the crisp sound of high heels hitting the ground rang out, followed by a beautiful voice. "Ah, Tang Jing, you're back." As soon as she finished speaking, a figure flew over like a gust of wind. If not for Tang Jing moving to the side, she would have directly pounced on Tang Jing. If this person wasn't Princess Anne, who else could it be? Princess Anne was still perfect and flawless, causing people's hearts to palpitate. She stared at Tang Jing with a pair of big black eyes, looking at him in pleasant surprise. During this period of time, not only did her life as a commoner not consume her noble temperament, it made her seem even more outstanding, like the most noble and holy white swan in the world. "You're finally back. I thought you would never come back after leaving without saying goodbye," Princess Anne said happily. Tang Jing pointed to the house with a straight face and asked, "What did you do to me? Is it beautiful?" Princess Annie showed off excitedly, just like a child showing off the fruits of her labor to an adult. "These are all carefully designed by me. Every piece of decoration was personally selected by me. They were flown in from Sweden. I guarantee that they are absolutely authentic." Tang Jing rolled his eyes and said, "Is there a need for that?" "Of course it is necessary. Home is the most important place for us to live in. If we aren't satisfied with it, then we won't have the energy to work and study all day, so this is necessary." Princess Anne nodded and said solemnly. Tang Jing was speechless. According to his understanding, a home was a place to put one's soul. A simple house was enough. There was no need to be so luxurious. There was indeed a world of difference between a princess and a commoner. "You came back at the right time. I've been in Wuxia for so long, but I've never had the chance to take a good look around the capital. Every day I have to juggle between school and home. I'm getting tired of it," Princess Anne grumbled. "No time." Tang Jing refused without hesitation. Princess Anne was not angry. She rolled her eyes and slyly said, "If you promise me, then I will tell you something very important." "What is it?" Promise me and I'll tell you. If you don't want to say it, then forget it. Tang Jing was not going to fall for it. Okay, I'll tell you. Princess and compromised. Yi Dingdang is sick? What? Tang Jing was shocked. I knew you would be interested. Princess and proudly said, ever since you silently disappeared, she has been sick. Tang Jing did not say anything and rushed out the door. Stop. Where are you going? Princess and shouted. I'm going to look for Dingdang. To tell the truth, when he heard that Yi Dingdang was seriously ill, Tang Jing's heart felt as if it had been hollowed out. Worry surged in, accompanied by a strong sense of self-blame. Come back, you don't have to go. She has already recovered. Princess and quickly said. Recovered? Of course you disappeared for so long. If she was sick for so long, then wouldn't it be very serious? Then what kind of illness does she have? Princess and shook her head. I don't know, but I heard from their roommates that it should be related to you. Related to me? Tang Jing felt a pain in his heart as he remembered the last time they parted. Yi Dingdang's determination to leave the table in the middle of the night, as well as the intense pain in her eyes, even a blind person could see it clearly. It would be strange if she wasn't angry and sad that he had disappeared for no reason. Therefore her illness was most likely caused by him. Thinking to this point, Tang Jing could not stand still any longer and said to Marshall, Go to my room to rest, I'll leave for a while. Although Marshall knew what Tang Jing was going to do, she did not stop him. She had thousands of voices in her heart that wanted to stop Tang Jing, but in the end she did not say anything. Hey, don't go. I've already told you. You have to accompany me to the capital. Princess and did not have any worries and straightforwardly called out. Tang Jing did not even turn his head as he turned a deaf ear and disappeared through the door, leaving behind the two women looking at each other in dismay. Princess and fiercely stomped her feet and said, If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have told him this news. I ran away so quickly like a rabbit. With that, he turned his gaze and fixed it on Marshall. The corner of his mouth slightly raised as he asked with interest, You are Marshall, right? Marshall proudly raised his head and did not answer. He directly walked towards Tang Jing's room. Wow, you have a personality. Princess Anne's eyes lit up. She had never been a person who followed the rules and regulations. She was a typical rebel amongst the princesses of the royal family. Seeing martial arts being so cold, she did not feel offended. Instead, she was interested. It's almost time for dinner. It must be over. I'll treat you to a meal. Princess Anne took the initiative to express her goodwill. If it was anyone else, they would definitely be overjoyed. They would feel that it was their greatest honor. But Marshall did not take this lying down. He turned around and left. With a bang, he closed the door, leaving Princess Anne to stare. She smacked her lips. She did not feel offended. Instead, she praised from the bottom of her heart, Such a girl with a personality is really too interesting. It seems that we will be living under the same roof in the future. That's great. Oh no, doesn't this mean that Tang Jing is going to live with Marshall? Her face instantly darkened, and the light in her eyes also disappeared in an instant. Tang Jing anxiously rushed to school but was told that Yi Dingdang had gone home. Thus, under the complaints of Yi Dingdang's 3 roommates, he hurriedly rushed towards the Ye family. The Ye family's courtyard house was serene and quiet. However, it was completely different from the courtyard house that Tang Jing previously went to. He did not rush into the Ye family's entrance because he was stopped at the entrance. He was already considered a frequent guest of the Ye family. How could the guards at the entrance not recognize him? However, he was still stopped. Tang Jing suspiciously raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's going on with you guys?" "Sorry, the Ye family does not welcome you," the guard stiffly said. "Does not welcome me? Did you recognize the wrong person?" Tang Jing asked in confusion. "Of course we recognize you. We would still recognize you even if you turned into ashes." The guard unhappily said, "Aren't you Tang Jing? The one we are stopping is you. The Ye family does not welcome you." Tang Jing was speechless. Just what happened? How could there be such a big change in the blink of an eye? No, he had to see Yi Dingdang. Otherwise he would not be able to sleep and eat in peace. "If you want to stop me, then don't blame me for being impolite." Tang Jing was ready to force his way in. With a push of his hands, the guard was no match for him. With a bang, he slammed into the door and could no longer block his way. Tang Jing rushed into the Ye family. In an instant, many people gathered from all directions and shouted angrily, "Stop! Do you think the Ye family is a place where you can come and go as you please? Stop right there." The crowd attacked and Tang Jing immediately fell into a sea of people. Seeing that he could not move forward, Tang Jing was burning with anxiety and anger. Since that's the case, then don't blame me for being impolite. Bang bang bang, his figure flashed and palm shadows flew. The people in front of him were sent flying one by one. After a while there was no one who could stand up. Tang Zheng was about to move forward when suddenly, an angry roar exploded. Stop! Yi Tianlei walked out with an ashen face and scolded, Tang Zheng, this is the Ye family. What are you doing? Are you deliberately offending the Ye family? Yi Tianlei had never used such a harsh tone to treat Tang Zheng. Even when Tang Zheng did not like him, he did not do so. Looking at Yi Tianlei, Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He braced himself and said, Uncle Yi, how would I dare to offend the Ye family? It's just that when I wanted to come in, they just had to stop me. The Ye family does not welcome you. Didn't they make it clear to you? Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you're strong in modification? Yi Tianlei asked loudly. Of course not. Tang Zheng flatly denied, I just can't wait to see Ding Dang. You still dare to mention Ding Dang? You still have the face to mention Ding Dang? Yi Tianlei was so angry that he could not restrain his anger as he asked. Tang Zheng was stunned. Yi Tianlei's reaction was too big. It was as if he was a different person. But he did not back down. He braced himself and said, Uncle Yi, don't be angry. I know that I made Ding Dang angry. I'm here to apologize to her. Apologize? Where did you go before? You disappeared for no reason and now you're here to apologize? What do you think my daughter is, Yi Tianlei? You want her to come and go as you please? You want to settle this with a simple apology? Yi Tianlei angrily asked. Of course not. I definitely don't have such thoughts. I had some urgent matters to attend to before. Otherwise I wouldn't have come to see Ding Dang only today. Tang Zheng patiently explained. But Yi Tianlei did not have the patience. He didn't even want to say another word to him. He waved his hand in disgust and said, There's no point in saying more. The Ye family does not welcome you and Ding Dang doesn't want to see you either. Also, I'm telling you from now on, don't disturb my daughter. Uncle Yi, there's some misunderstanding between Ding Dang and I. It'll be fine after we clear things up. Tang Zheng explained. Misunderstanding? There's no misunderstanding. Tang Zheng, I misjudged you. You're really an expert at playing with a girl's feelings. I've seen plenty of people like you. If you don't leave, then I'll beat you up every time I see you. Yi Tianlei threatened as he clenched his fists. Chapter 7:16. Yi Tianlei angrily glared at Tang Zheng and said, Do you really think I don't dare to hit you? Tang Zheng raised his neck high, his gaze firm, clearly expressing his attitude. Fine, since that's the case, then I'll fulfill your wish. Seeing this, Yi Tianlei flew into a rage. Kacha, his fist clenched tightly. So, like lightning, his large fist struck Tang Zheng's chest. He only used 50% of his strength. He thought that Tang Zheng would dodge, but he did not dodge at all, directly taking this punch. With a muffled sound, Tang Zheng was like a sandbag, flying backwards and fiercely crashing into a tree trunk. Kacha, the tree trunk snapped in half. Tang Zheng spat out a mouthful of blood. Although this punch was not enough to heavily injure him, he did not use his martial arts to block it. All of the power was completely absorbed by his body, so there was no need to doubt the shock to his internal organs. Why didn't you dodge? Yi Tianlei asked. Tang Zheng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, I already said that I would let you hit me. Why would I dodge? Yi Tianlei was speechless, his expression changing slightly. Even though he looked angry on the surface, his heart did not feel good at all. He had always thought highly of Tang Zheng, as this kind of young elite was as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. He and Ding Dang were originally a match made in heaven, but who would have thought that in the end he would hurt his daughter's heart and even cause her to fall ill? If it was any other parent, they would be angry. Inside the room, two pairs of eyes stared at Tang Zheng through the gap in the window. When she saw Tang Zheng injured and spitting out blood, Yi Dingdong's expression changed, her snow-white teeth biting her lips. Feng Xinyang saw her daughter's appearance from the side and faintly sighed, saying, Little handsome brother is actually quite good. Just punish him a bit. If this continues, there will be no way to end it. Yi Dingdang resolutely said, I have nothing to do with him anymore. What's the point? You two are really a good match. If you withdraw, wouldn't other women be taking advantage of you? Feng Xinyang persuaded earnestly. Wouldn't that fulfill his wish? Doesn't he like those women? Yi Dingdang said in a bad mood. Dingdang, I won't interfere with your decision, but don't blame me if you regret it in the future. Yi Dingdang turned to look at her mother and said, You've been with Dad for so many years. Has he ever looked for other women? Feng Xinyang raised an eyebrow. If he dares, it would be strange if I didn't cripple him. Yi Dingdang smiled bitterly. If Dad can do it, why can't he? This? Feng Xinyang hesitantly said, everyone is different. Your father isn't as capable as him. Just because he's capable, he can flirt with other women? Feng Xinyang wanted to say yes. In today's society, how many successful people are loyal to one person? But looking at her daughter's expression, she took back these cruel words. Yi Dingdang coldly snorted and said, before I chose to turn a blind eye. But I didn't expect that not only did he not restrain himself, he became more and more unbridled. I'm afraid he can't even count how many women he has by his side. Alright, since you've made your decision, I won't persuade you. But we can't always let him cause trouble outside. Humph, I want to see how long he can cause trouble. Yi Dingdang turned around and sat on the sofa, picked up a book and started reading. Feng Xinyang helplessly shook her head. She said in her heart, what's the point of torturing these two people? She glanced out the window and secretly said, little handsome brother, why are you so muddle-headed? At this moment, Tang Jing wasn't muddle-headed at all. His mind was very clear. He finally realized the seriousness of the situation. Yi Dingdang was serious this time. People were most afraid of being serious. Once they were serious, things would develop in an unpredictable direction. Tang Jing didn't want to see such a result. He decided not to leave. He had to see Dingdang and explain things to her face to face. You really don't want to leave? Yi Tianlei was at his wit's end and asked again. Yes. Alright, then you wait. I'll see how long you wait. Yi Tianlei angrily flicked his sleeves and left. He really couldn't do anything about Tang Jing. Tang Jing looked towards a small room in front of him. He could confirm that there were two people looking at him in that room. One of them had a very familiar aura. It must be Yi Dingdang. However, he did not rush in immediately. He knew that Yi Dingdang was still angry, so he would wait for her to calm down. He could afford to wait. As night fell, in the courtyard of the Ye family, a person stood upright like a piece of wood. The people of the Ye family pointed at him from time to time, but Tang Jing ignored them. He only stared straight at the room, hoping that the moment the door opened, the figure that haunted his dreams would walk out. Who is this? Why are you standing here in the dark? Scram to the side. Suddenly, a delicate voice came from behind him. Tang Jing frowned without even turning his head. He knew who it was, Yi Meiyu. Yi Meiyu had used a honey trap on Tang Jing back then, but Tang Jing did not react at all, causing her to fly into a rage out of humiliation, and she had always harbored a grudge in her heart. In addition, the good relationship between Tang Jing and Yi Dingdang's family made Yi Tianlei's position in the Ye family more and more stable, which made Yi Meiyu even angrier. Today Yi Meiyu was in a good mood. A while ago Yi Dingdang was seriously ill, so she was secretly happy for a long time. Previously she went to a party and hooked up with a little fresh meat. Only then did she go home in satisfaction. However, she did not expect that not long after she entered the house, she would almost bump into someone. Her good mood was immediately destroyed, and her big mistemper immediately flared up. Seeing that the other party was silent and did not move at all, Yi Meiyu felt that she had been completely ignored. She did not recognize Tang Jing and thought that he was just a servant of the Ye family. She immediately flew into a rage and raised the bag in her hand to smash Tang Jing's head, shouting, I told you not to open your eyes, I want you to know how powerful I am. Tang Jing could withstand Yi Tianlei's fist, but that did not mean that anyone could hit him. Hearing the sound of the wind behind him, he grabbed onto the other party's bag and forcefully snatched it away. With a so sound, the bag turned into a gust of wind and flew over the courtyard wall, disappearing without a trace. After Yi Meiyu's brain went blank for a short period of time, she completely exploded and shouted hysterically, You dare to resist? Men, capture him and beat him up. When did the Ye family let such an ignorant fellow in? However, no one responded to her, and no one came to stand up for her and chase away Tang Jing. Yi Tianlei had already given the order to treat Tang Jing as heir and ignore him. Seeing that no one came to help her, Yi Meiyu was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She rushed to the front of Tang Jing and forcefully swallowed the vulgarities that she was about to blurt out. She stared dumbfoundedly at the face that she would never forget even if she became a ghost. Tang Jing, it's him. Why is he here? Is he here to look for Yi Dingdang again? Yi Meiyu's expression changed rapidly as she ridiculed, Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it's the famous Tang Jing standing in our courtyard in the middle of the night. Are you here to be our Ye family's guard? Tang Jing glanced at her and said, Scram! Immediately, the mocking smile on Yi Meiyu's face froze, her face turned from red to white and finally to ashen and said, Tang Jing, this is the Ye family, it's not your place to be arrogant and despotic. Tang Jing coldly snorted and ignored her, only staring straight at Yi Dingdong's room. Seeing that she was ignored, Yi Meiyu became even angrier. Following his gaze, she immediately locked onto the room and said angrily, I understand now, you're relying on someone to support you, right? I Yi Meiyu have had enough. Today, I want to see how Yi Dingdang colluded with outsiders and came to our Ye family to be so arrogant. After she finished speaking, she rushed to Yi Dingdong's door with large strides and smashed the door, causing it to shake violently. Yi Dingdang, come out. You're getting more and more powerful. You colluded with outsiders and came to the Ye family to behave atrociously. Do you think that the Ye family belongs to you, Yi Dingdang? Yi Meiyu complained indignantly. There was no movement in the room. Yi Dingdang, I know you're inside. You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it? Are you a coward? Yi Meiyu continued to smash on the door. Tang Jing frowned and berated, Yi Meiyu, this is none of your business, scram to the side. Hearing the word scram again, Yi Meiyu felt as if her entire body was on fire. She turned her head and glared angrily at Tang Jing. She could not do anything to him, especially now that Tang Jing's strength had increased greatly. Even Yi Xuanji did not dare to look down on him, let alone Yi Meiyu. However, she could not do anything to Tang Jing, but she was not afraid of Yi Dingdang. Moreover, she had long been dissatisfied with Yi Dingdang. With the new and old grudges added together, she completely exploded. She crazily slammed on the door, almost smashing it apart, and shouted, Yi Dingdang, get out here. Is it fun to be a coward? Hearing his beloved being insulted like this, how could Tang Jing just sit back and watch? He quickly rushed to the door, grabbed Yi Meiyu's collar and berated, stop. However, Yi Meiyu did not stop. Instead, she felt even more angry and humiliated, and grabbed Tang Jing's face with her hand, shouting hysterically, you guys are working together to bully me, I'll fight it out with you guys. Tang Jing grabbed her hand. If he was caught, the sharp nails would definitely scratch Tang Jing's skin, and that would be extremely embarrassing. Seeing that she was making trouble for no reason, Tang Jing's face darkened, and he snappily scolded her. If you don't listen to my advice, then don't blame me for being impolite. Why don't you be polite? Are you going to hit me or kill me? Alright, Yi Dingdang, you actually colluded with a wild man outside to kill me, you really have guts. Yi Meiyu clamored, purposely framing Yi Dingdang. The commotion caused by the two of them was too big. All the servants of the Ye family were pointing at them from afar, but no one dared to come forward to help. This involved the open and hidden struggle between the two brothers of the Ye family. They did not dare to participate. Stop. Chapter 717. Tang Jing's hand that was holding onto Yi Meiyu froze. He stared at the person who walked out and cried out involuntarily, Ding Ding. Yi Dingdong's face was as calm as the surface of a lake without a single ripple. She coldly said, let her go. Tang Jing released his hand, and when Yi Meiyu regained her freedom, her anger became even stronger. A single sentence from Yi Dingdang was enough to make Tang Jing obey, but he actually dared to make a move on her, Yi Meiyu. The difference between them was immediately obvious. Yi Dingdang, you colluded with outsiders to cause trouble in the Ye family. I'll fight it out with you. After saying that, he pounced on Yi Dingdang with bared fangs and brandished claws. Yi Dingdang did not expect Yi Meiyu to be so unreasonable and even dare to make a move. However, at such a close distance, even if her skills were much better than Yi Meiyu's, it would still be useless. Those long nails would definitely scratch Yi Dingdong's delicate skin, and might even leave scars and disfigure her. How dare you? Tang Jing was shocked. His reaction was extremely fast as he blocked Yi Meiyu's path in a flash. Yi Meiyu's fingernails scratched Tang Jing's neck, leaving a long mark, but it did not cut through his skin. Instead, Yi Meiyu's fingernails broke with a crack. Ah! Yi Meiyu let out a heart-wrenching scream. Holding onto her hand, she immediately retreated and looked at Tang Jing in shock. She had clearly succeeded, but why was the other party not injured at all? That was impossible. However, she did not know that Tang Jing had cultivated the primal Chaos Vajra spell. Not to mention his fingernails, as long as he circulated his energy, ordinary weapons would not be able to harm him in the slightest. Yi Dingdang saw that he had stepped forward bravely to protect her, and her heart couldn't help but be moved. She quickly looked at his neck, deeply afraid that something bad had happened to him. But seeing that there was no serious injury, she swallowed back the words of concern that were about to come out of her mouth. Tang Jing turned around and looked at Yi Dingdang with a burning gaze. When their eyes met, they could feel each other's breathing. Yi Dingdang quickly lowered her head and said calmly, "You should leave. What's the point of continuing to cause trouble here? Instead, it will only make others laugh." Dingdang listened to my explanation. "There's nothing between me and Princess N, it's not like what you think." Tang Jing immediately seized this opportunity and explained himself. Yi Dingdang said calmly, "What is your relationship with her? What does it have to do with me? You don't have to explain it to me." "Dingdang, I know you are still angry at me. The reason why I left this time was because I had something important to do, so I left without saying goodbye. I really had no choice but to do so. I only just found out that you fell sick after I left. It is all my fault. When you were at your weakest, I was not by your side. In the future, I will definitely spend more time with you." Yi Dingdang's eyes showed some fluctuations, but her face didn't change in the slightest. She said, "I don't want to hear this. It's useless for you to say this to me. I also don't need you to accompany me. You have so many women, you can accompany them as much as you want." Tang Jing finally knew where the crux of the matter was. She wasn't angry with Princess Anne, but his messy relationship with other women. But now that things had come to this, he had no way of abandoning other women. He couldn't do this. It wasn't because he was a playboy, but because of his responsibility as a man. He made a promise to them, so he would use his life to keep this promise. Even if there were many difficulties and obstacles, he would do it regardless of rain or shine. This was a dead end. He couldn't give Yi Dingdang what she needed. A complete Tang Jing who completely belonged to Yi Dingdang. Looking at her expressionless face, Tang Jing's heart ached. Even if he had the ability to reach the heavens, there was no way to resolve the current situation. Tang Jing wasn't a domineering person. On the contrary, he was very good at taking care of other people's feelings, especially the feelings of women. He and Yi Dingdang definitely had feelings for each other. After going through so much together, their feelings for each other weren't shallow. But for various reasons he couldn't meet Yi Dingdang's expectations. Or it could be said that Yi Dingdang had misophobia when it came to relationships. She wouldn't allow her man to be owned by another woman. She needed a complete man. Tang Jing had a deep sense of frustration. No matter how many difficulties he had experienced in the past and how he had hovered on the edge of life and death, he had never been so depressed. Looking at Yi Dingdang's eyes in a daze, Tang Jing asked, "Can you really not forgive this?" Yi Dingdang heard the strange emotion in his voice and raised her head. Their eyes met. Yi Dingdang's heart ached, but she still asked loudly, "How do you want me to forgive you? Do you want me to watch you fool around with other women in the future? Do you want me to sleep with other women? Yi Dingdang can't do it. Maybe I thought I could do it in the past, but later I realized that I can't do it. My feelings can't be tarnished." "My feelings for you are real," Tang Jing added. "But it's already been divided into several parts. I need a complete one. Can you give it to me?" Yi Dingdang seemed to have thrown caution to the wind and expressed her feelings completely. Tang Jing was speechless. He couldn't give her a complete one. This was a dead knot. Yi Dingdang looked at him mockingly and said, "You have nothing to say now, right? Since that's the case, why are you still pestering me? There won't be a result in the end anyway." "I don't like things that don't end well." "Are you serious?" Tang Jing asked unwillingly. Yi Dingdang raised her head high and said, "When have I, Yi Dingdang, ever not been serious?" "Yes. Back then when she was with Tang Jing, she was incomparably serious. Of course, now that they were going to separate, she was also serious. Although there were 1,000 voices in her heart telling her not to do this, she still insisted in the end. This was Yi Dingdang. If she compromised, she wouldn't be Yi Dingdang. "All right, since you're so insistent, I can't do anything about it." Tang Jing compromised. Although he was extremely unwilling, this was an unsolvable problem. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't solve it. This was because he couldn't give up on other women. "Dingdang, this is a sword that I specially chose for you. This is my final gift to you. When I'm not by your side in the future, this clear wind sword will protect you for me." Tang Jing took out the clear wind sword. He had specially chosen it for Yi Dingdang in the Langya Pavilion because it was very compatible with the wind-chasing sword technique. Yi Dingdang looked at the clear wind sword and shook her head. "I don't need it." Tang Jing didn't allow her to refuse and stuffed it into her hands. It was cool and gentle to the touch. Her skin moved his heart, but he wouldn't be able to touch it in the future. He reluctantly let go of his hand. Yi Dingdang looked at the clear wind sword in her hands and then looked at Tang Jing's persistent eyes. Her heart softened and she said, All right, I'll accept your gift. Thank you. Tang Zheng's lips twitched and he forced out a smile. His smile was uglier than crying and was 1,000 times more bitter as he said, then take care of yourself. You too. Yi Dingdang looked at him as if she wanted to deeply imprint his appearance in her mind, afraid that she would forget him in the future. They both knew that they couldn't be friends after breaking up like normal couples. They couldn't do it because their feelings for each other were too deep. When their feelings were too deep, if they couldn't have each other, they couldn't force themselves to be friends. That would be too cruel and painful. I'm leaving. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and used all his strength to say these 3 words. Yi Dingdang nodded. Tang Zheng turned around, his legs felt as if they were filled with lead. His breathing also became heavy as if he couldn't catch his breath. However, he did not turn around and walked out of the Yi clan's main door under countless gazes. The others could feel the strong feelings between the two of them, but fate played tricks on them. Sometimes things just couldn't go as one wished. Only one person was overjoyed. Yimeyu almost jumped up in joy and laughed out loud. Yi Dingdang and Tang Zheng's relationship had always been valued by Yi Dingdang, and Yimeyu paled in comparison. But now that the two of them had broken up, Yi Dingdang's advantage was gone. When Yi Dingdang was sad, Yimeyu was happy and incomparably happy at that. Seeing her looking at the clear wind sword in her hand in a daze, Yimeyu mocked mercilessly, "What's so good about a broken sword? No one wants it even if it's a piece of scrap metal." Yi Dingdang's expression changed. Swoosh, the treasured sword was unsheathed, the sword intent soared into the sky, the bright sword tip was pointed at Yimeyu's throat. If it moved another inch, it would pierce through her throat. Yimeyu looked as if she had been immobilized. She immediately raised her hands and exclaimed, "Yi Dingdang, what are you doing? If you dare to insult this sword again and insult Tang Zheng again, I will use this sword to kill you," Yi Dingdang said with killing intent. Yimeyu's entire body trembled. She could see a strong killing intent in Yi Dingdang's eyes. If she dared to speak rudely again, she had no doubt that Yi Dingdang would kill her. I don't dare, I don't dare." Yimeyu immediately begged for mercy. Yi Dingdang snorted coldly. Just as she was about to put away the clear wind sword, a figure appeared beside her. His finger brushed against the sword and praised, good sword, a rare treasure sword." This ghost-like person was the patriarch of the Ye family, Yi Xuanji. Yimeyu was so embarrassed that her cheeks flushed red. Just now she had said that the sword was a piece of scrap metal, but now the patriarch praised it as a treasure sword. However, no one cared about Yimeyu's embarrassment anymore. Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang also walked over. Feng Xinyang's eyes were moist. Looking at her daughter, her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. However, in the end, their gazes were still attracted by the clear wind sword, and their eyes could not help but light up. The two of them did not use weapons, but they still had good eyesight. This clear wind sword was definitely the best treasure sword they had ever seen in their lives. "This is too precious," Yi Tianlei exclaimed. "Dingdang, can I take a look?" Yi Xuanji asked for his opinion. Yi Dingdang nodded. When Yi Xuanji received the clear wind sword, his expression changed greatly. The clear wind sword was as light as air. He had never heard of such a sword before. Immediately, he knew that he had underestimated the value of the sword. This was not an ordinary treasure sword, but a peerless treasure sword. It was a divine weapon that countless warriors yearned for even in their dreams. Chapter 7:18. Yi Xuanji stared blankly at the clear wind sword and asked, "Dingdang, do you know where he got this sword from?" Yi Dingdang was not in the mood at all as she shook her head. Yi Xuanji could also see that she was in low spirits, but he still had too many questions in his heart, so he did not give up and continued to ask, "Although this is a peerless treasure sword because it is too extraordinary, it can be said to be of little use to ordinary warriors." "Oh, why is that?" Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang curiously asked. "Because it is too light. Normal martial arts cannot control this treasure sword," Yi Xuanji mysteriously said. Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang were suddenly enlightened. That's right, how could a normal weapon not have weight? This kind of weapon was like air and normal people could not control it. It required a set of martial arts. But as far as they knew, they had never heard of this kind of martial arts. For a moment, the three of them felt regret. Having a godly weapon but not being able to use it, this was one of the biggest regrets of a martial artist. Yi Dingdang heard their conversation and expressionlessly said, "Tang Zheng has already taught me a set of sword techniques that can control this clear wind sword." "He has already taught you a set of sword techniques? What sword techniques?" The others were shocked as they could not help but recall the time when Tang Jing taught her the Jade Maiden Heart Sutra. The Jade Maiden Heart Sutra was a rare martial art book for normal martial artists. But in Tang Jing's hands, it was like a cabbage that was casually given away. The sword technique this time must be even more extraordinary, but Tang Jing had already taught it to Yi Dingdang without anyone knowing. Even the other members of the Ye family did not know. This was just too shocking. Wind-chasing sword technique. Yi Dingdang indifferently said as she turned around and left. Dingdang, your clear wind sword. Yi Xuanji quickly returned the clear wind sword to her. Although he knew that the clear wind sword was a peerless divine weapon, he would not covet this weapon. Yi Dingdang then took it and rushed into the room with large strides. With a bang, the door was shut tight. The others looked at each other, speechless. Yi Meiyu looked at the tightly shut door with red eyes, thinking that Tang Jing was really blind, to actually be so good to Yi Dingdang. Not only did he give her such a precious sword, he even matched it with a corresponding martial arts. Why didn't he have this kind of luck? The heavens were unfair. Tang Jing opened the door in a daze and saw Princess An sitting on the sofa, watching TV intently. Princess An was wearing a silk nightgown. It was very light and even a little translucent. Her underwear was faintly discernible, and it was very eye-catching. However, at this moment, it did not attract Tang Jing's attention at all. Tang Jing walked past her in a daze, not even looking at her. Tang Jing, what's wrong with you? And no longer called Tang Jing an immortal but called him by his name. Tang Jing ignored her. In fact, deep down in his heart he still blamed Princess An. If not for her arrival, he would not have ignited the fuse and caused Yi Dingdang to leave him. However, deep down in his heart he also understood that he was just twisting words and forcing logic to excuse himself. At the end of the day, the crux of all of this was him. If he did not have so many romantic debts, Yi Dingdang would naturally not have left him. Therefore, he forcefully suppressed the disappointment and anger in his heart and did not lose his temper at Anne. And looked at him with a strange expression. How could she, who was extremely smart, not see through Tang Jing's abnormal reaction? There's a problem. Didn't he go to see Yi Dingdang? Could it be that he had a conflict with Yi Dingdang? And guest, if there's anything you can tell me, I can also help you solve your problems. And volunteered and blocked Tang Jing's way. Tang Jing casually pushed her away and pressed his hands on her chest. However, the moment he touched her, he pulled away without any improper thoughts. Princess An immediately froze. She watched as Tang Jing entered the bedroom and closed the door. Her mind was still blank. He actually touched my chest. She, who had been pampered since she was young, had never been taken advantage of by other men. She had a strange feeling in her heart. However, Westerners were much more open-minded in this aspect than Easterners. She did not really hold Tang Jing responsible for this matter. She only looked at the closed door with a complicated expression. Her hand couldn't help but rub the place where Tang Jing had pushed her. Inside the room, Marshall was originally lying on the bed. She thought that Tang Jing would not come back tonight, so she felt a little disappointed. However, when she saw that Tang Jing had returned, she jumped up from the bed like a carp. But when she saw Tang Jing's expression, she was stunned. She had been with Tang Jing for so long, but she had never seen such an expression on his face. It was as if he had lost his soul. Wu's heart skipped a beat as a strong sense of unease and worry welled up within him. She quickly supported him and asked, "What happened to you?" Tang Jing shook his head and said, "I'll rest for a while." After he finished speaking, he laid down on the bed, his eyes wide open as he stared at the ceiling. Wu was shocked and quickly touched his forehead. He didn't have a fever, but his dark and lifeless eyes made her feel confused. "Tang Jing, just what happened?" She snuggled up to the bed and stared at him as she asked. Tang Jing stared at the ceiling, his eyes gradually turning red. The emotions that he had accumulated all the way finally exploded as he said involuntarily, "Dingdang and I have broken up." Wu was so shocked by this news that she sucked in a breath of cold air, her entire body trembling. She was very clear about the inextricable entanglement between Tang Jing and Yi Dingdang. One had to know that when Wu first met Tang Jing, Yi Dingdang was by his side and was even being chased by Wu together. Therefore the two of them shared life and death. This friendship was something that ordinary people would find difficult to achieve. In fact, Wu had to admit that his position in Tang Jing's eyes was definitely not as high as Yi Dingdang's. However, the two of them had actually broken up. This was no different from a bolt from the blue. What? Why is she so stupid? Wu asked in disbelief. She really wanted to reach the position that Yi Dingdang had in Tang Jing's eyes, But that was not something that could be achieved in a short period of time. She did not expect that Yi Dingdang would have such a great advantage, but would voluntarily withdraw. It's not that she's stupid, it's that I'm a bastard. I'm too greedy. Tang Jing muttered. He was indeed greedy. He couldn't bear to let go of any woman beside him unless they took the initiative to leave him like Yi Dingdang. Then there was nothing he could do. Of course, after he urged her to stay, he wouldn't pester her. That wasn't his style. Everyone had their own choices. Even though he was extremely reluctant, he still respected the other party's choice. Wu blinked and roughly guessed what was going on. However, he still asked, "You're so good, how could she bear to leave you?" Everyone has their own principles and perseverance. It's different. Tang Jing shook his head and said absent-mindedly. Looking at his pained expression, Wu did not gloat. She had lost another competitor. Instead, she felt heart-wrenching pain. Because if Tang Jing was in pain, she would be in 100 times more pain than him. She couldn't help but hug Tang Jing into her embrace, allowing his head to lean against her full chest. She gently stroked his head and said, "I won't leave you. I'll never leave you." This was a decision she had made a long time ago. At this moment she couldn't help but say it out loud. It was extremely natural and there wasn't the slightest bit of inconsistency. Tang Jing's heart moved. He raised his head, looked at her beautiful face and asked, "Really?" Wu nodded heavily without hesitation. "Absolutely." Tang Jing squeezed out a smile, closed his eyes and fell asleep. During this period of time he was simply too tired. His nerves were highly concentrated and his body and mind were exhausted. After experiencing the unforeseen event with Yi Dingdang, his body and mind were even more exhausted. He couldn't help but fall asleep in Wu's embrace. Wu's embrace was very warm and soft, giving him an unprecedented sense of peace. Wu was slightly startled. Looking at him sleeping soundly like a mischievous boy, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but reveal a smile. He hugged him even tighter, pressed his face against his face and smelled the scent of his body. His heart was exceptionally satisfied. Early in the morning, the first ray of sunlight shone in through the window. Tang Jing opened his eyes in a daze. Why is it so soft? He rolled his eyes and discovered that he was actually lying in Wu's embrace. His head was resting on her chest, and that beautiful hemisphere had been pressed to the point of being deformed. He suddenly realized what had happened last night. He had actually fallen asleep just like that. She had hugged him all night. He slightly got up, wanting to crawl out of her embrace but heard a groan. Wu Yuyu woke up and when she saw Tang Jing on her chest, her face immediately flushed red. She looked flustered and stammered, "You're awake?" Tang Jing squeezed out a smile and said, "Yes, I'm awake." After saying that, he quickly got up from her body. "Thank you for last night. You should have woken me up. You must be exhausted after sitting like this for an entire night." "I'm fine. Seeing how tired you are, I can't bear to wake you up." Wu Ho did not finish her sentence. In fact, she also enjoyed the feeling of Tang Jing lying in her embrace. If the two of them could lie together like this for the rest of their lives, it would be a great blessing. "Last night Wu said hesitantly. Tang Jing waved his hand and said, "Everything is in the past. A new day, a new beginning." Obviously, after a night of adjustment, Tang Jing's emotions had recovered by 70 to 80%. As a man, he would not be so wishy-washy as to immerse himself in pain. That was not his style. No one who was decisive enough to kill would do that. "I'm going to class today. You can arrange your own time." Wu nodded in agreement. Opening the door and walking out, Princess and immediately stared at the two of them with a thought-provoking gaze. Last night, the two of them had actually slept in the same room. She did not need to waste her brain cells to guess what had happened. In fact, in the middle of the night, she really wanted to listen to the corner of the wall. However, she had renovated the room and the soundproofing effect was too good. She could not hear anything. Looking at Wu's exhausted appearance, Princess and understood tacitly. She thought that the two of them must have tossed and turned for the entire night. Her eyes subconsciously looked towards Tang Jing's lower body. Chapter 719. Princess and did not have the chance to gossip about what Tang Jing and Marshall did last night because Tang Jing directly left after washing up. Princess and immediately chased after him but found that he had already disappeared. She could only fiercely stomp her feet to vent the dissatisfaction in her heart. Early in the morning, Tang Jing returned to room 502. His roommates were still sleeping soundly. When they saw Tang Jing, they all jumped out of bed as if they had seen a ghost. They circled around him a few times and said, Old 3, this time you disappeared for so long. Are you alright? Tang Jing gave a knowing smile and shook his head saying he was fine. TSK Old 3, this time you played too big. Yi Dingdang is very angry with you. You have to think of a way to calm her down. Tang Jing's expression darkened and said, I broke up with her. Broke up? The three of them were all shocked as if they had seen a ghost. They looked at him in disbelief and said, Old 3, you can't be serious, right? It's true. Tang Jing said solemnly. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. They had always thought that Tang Jing and Yi Dingdang would walk together in the end. Yi Dingdang's valiant and heroic appearance was not something an ordinary person could handle. But they never thought that fate would make a fool of them and the two of them would break up. The three of them secretly sighed and patted Tang Jing's shoulder. They said with a heavy tone, Old 3, a real man does not have to worry about not having a wife. Even if you give up this big tree, there is still a forest. Tang Jing did not want to continue this topic and asked, Did anything happen in school recently? Oh, there is one thing. Professor Qi Shaoan has resumed teaching. Tang Jing nodded his head as this was expected. Back then, with the help of Princess and Qi Shaoan was exposed so that the villains behind him could no longer plot against him. Professor Qi naturally recovered his position and work. The other things are not big, but the island nation next door has an earth-shattering event. Do you know? Tang Jing nodded calmly. Serves him right. I wonder which ferocious person is so powerful. If I see him, I'll really have to bow 3 times to him. Tang Jing smiled bitterly. There's no need for that. How is it not necessary? It's very necessary. You don't know how many Wuxia people worship this fierce person. However, this person's identity is too secretive. Normal people can't find out anything about this person. The three of them said regretfully. Tang Jing shook his head and smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that his impulsive actions would win him so many fans even though the country was in a passive position. That person might have just done it casually. He didn't think too much about it at that time, Tang Jing said casually. Third brother, this is something you don't know. This kind of brave warrior naturally plans before taking action. How could he not think of so many things? It's just that the various governments are definitely investigating this person's identity. If it's exposed, it will definitely be dangerous. What's there to be afraid of if there's danger? That hero is so powerful, who in this world can hurt him? Yes, he's number 1 in the world, invincible in the world. The three of them were impassioned, cheering for this idol they had never met. Looking at this scene, Tang Jing laughed strangely. In the end, his laughter grew louder and louder. The three of them looked at Tang Jing strangely and said, Third brother, although we said that hero is the best in the world, you're not bad either. We definitely don't mean to belittle you. Yes, absolutely not. You're our good brother. You're different from that hero. The others echoed. Tang Jing clutched his stomach and laughed until he couldn't straighten his back. He looked at the three of them strangely and asked, Do you really want to see that person? Of course, I want to see him even in my dreams. The three of them nodded like they were pounding garlic. Suddenly, Zhou Yan had an idea. Third brother, we know that you know a lot of strange people. Could it be that you know this hero? In an instant, the other two also looked at Tang Jing with eyes full of anticipation. Tang Jing pretended to smile mysteriously and said, Is this person really that important to you? Of course, my idol. I didn't chase after stars before, but ever since I saw his feats, he's my idol. Sinosaurus patted his hard chest and said solemnly. All right, then I'll reveal the mystery. Your idol is far away in the horizon, but right in front of you. Tang Jing raised his hands and said to himself, Is my idol here? Where is he? The three of them looked at each other in dismay and swept their eyes around, trying to find traces of their idol. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pointed to himself and said, Isn't the one standing in front of you me? It's you. The three of them didn't understand for a moment, but as soon as they finished speaking, the three of them opened their eyes wide and stared straight at Tang Jing. As if they had just woken up from a dream, they said, Third brother, you're saying that our idol is you? You're that fierce person? Tang Jing smiled and nodded his head in acknowledgement. This was not something he did on a whim. A long time ago, he had the thought of helping his roommates become cultivators. However, at that time, the cultivators were weak and were being chased by the martial sect. If he let them become cultivators, it would be like pushing them into a fire pit. Of course, Tang Jing couldn't do such a thing to his friend, so this plan was put on hold. He specially refined a type of elixir, the energy cultivation pill, and let his roommates eat it as snacks. Unknowingly, the three roommates' bodies had undergone earth-shattering changes, but they were completely unaware of it. The energy cultivation pill could cleanse one's marrow and improve one's physique, making the body more suitable for cultivation. The three of them were completely unaware that they had received such a huge benefit. They just kept glaring at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng smiled at the three of them. Finally, the three of them confirmed that Tang Zheng was not joking. Moreover, Tang Zheng rarely joked. His idol was actually his roommate, Lao San. Damn Lao San, you disappeared for no reason this time because you went to the island nation. Sinosaurus exclaimed as he punched Tang Zheng's chest. The other two woke up from their stupor and said, Lao San, you're awesome. We always knew that you were very powerful, but we never thought that you would be this powerful. Idol, so Lao San is an idol. Come, everyone must hug one together. I dream of hugging an idol. The four of them hugged each other. Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the three of them. After a while, he retracted his smile and said seriously, Boss Lao Si, I want to tell you a secret. Are you willing to keep it a secret? Wang Shiji and Zhou Yan looked at each other and nodded. Of course, we're not big mouths. Sinosaurus's expression changed slightly. He glanced at Tang Zheng and guessed his thoughts. Sinosaurus had already become a cultivator by chance. Now, if the other two brothers could also become cultivators, then the four of them would roam the world together in the future. How exciting would that be? Just thinking about it made him so excited that he couldn't sleep. This is a very big secret. I didn't tell you before because I was afraid that you would be in danger, but now that things are different, the situation has changed drastically, telling you might not be a bad thing. Moreover, all the decisions are in your hands. I will respect your choice. Tang Zheng said seriously. Seeing Tang Zheng being so serious, Zhou Wang and Wang Shiji's expressions gradually became serious as they listened attentively to Tang Zheng's explanation. There are three types of people in this world. One is an ordinary person and the other is a martial artist. You are relatively familiar with these two types of people, but there is a third type of person that you have never heard of. What is the third type of person? The two of them asked curiously at the same time. Cultivator. Tang Zheng said resolutely, cultivators are very different from the first two types of people. When their strength is cultivated to the extreme, they can move mountains and overturn seas. A single person can resist thousands of soldiers and horses. In short, this kind of person's strength seems to have no upper limit. It is completely beyond the imagination of ordinary people. The two of them were dumbstruck. This information had completely overturned their previous understanding. Zhou Yan had an idea. He stared at Tang Zheng and asked, Lao San, then you are a cultivator? Tang Zheng nodded truthfully. Not only am I a cultivator, Lao Er has also been a cultivator for a long time. Lao Er? Their gazes immediately locked onto the tall Sinosaurus. Sinosaurus scratched his head in embarrassment and said, Lao San and Lao Si, don't be angry. We didn't tell you the truth this time because we had no choice. Moreover, I only became a cultivator at the beginning of this semester. All of this is thanks to Lao San, otherwise I would have lost my life long ago. F***CK, doesn't that mean that we have two cultivators in our dorm? Of course. Tang Zheng nodded and added, furthermore, how many cultivators we have in our dorm in the future will depend on your attitudes. The two of them were not idiots. They immediately realized the crux of the matter and quickly asked, you mean that the two of us can also become cultivators like you, and have the ability to move mountains and fill seas? I have already made preparations for you. Do you still remember the pills I gave you before? That is the Peiyuan Dan, it has already transformed your bodies. In the future, your cultivation will be twice as fast with half the effort. Tang Zheng explained. Peiyuan Dan? Not only Wang Zhou and Zhou Yan, even Sinosaurus had a face full of surprise as he exclaimed, the little bean-like thing you gave us before was actually a pill to help us improve our physique. You're being too good to us. We're all brothers, so this is what we should do. Lao San, Lao Si, then discuss it and see if you're willing to become a cultivator? Zhou Yan asked, are you saying that we can gallop around the world like you in the future? Of course. But why did you tell us before? What exactly happened to the situation? It's hard to explain in a few words. But one thing is certain, the world of the past will never return. Cultivators will quickly rise in this world and have a place for themselves. Tang Zheng said resolutely. Although he was not willing to bring back the cultivators of the sky beyond heaven, it did not mean that he did not welcome other cultivators. If the other party was a native cultivator of this world, then he would definitely welcome them with open arms. Chapter 720. In the face of such a good thing, Zhou Yan and Wang Shiji agreed without any hesitation. Every man yearned to become stronger from the bottom of his heart and had a dream of becoming a hero. Now that the opportunity was right in front of him, wouldn't he be a fool if he didn't seize it immediately? Tang Jing immediately taught them the basic knowledge of cultivation, and also taught them the god-killing method that he had taken out from the Langya Pavilion. After that, the four of them went to class. After experiencing the continuous battles of the island nation and returning to the peaceful life of a university, Tang Jing's heart couldn't help but calm down. Furthermore, he had delayed too many classes, so he had to make up for it as soon as possible. Although going to school was only a kind of experience for him, he still took it very seriously. The other students were already used to Tang Jing's elusive appearance. This archaeology department, or even Yinqing University's anomaly, was far from what others could compare to. During this period of time he was prepared to stay in school for a while. Moreover, with Princess An at home he would definitely be harassed when he went back. In addition, he had originally planned to meet Lu Qingmei, but she seemed to have transformed into a workaholic and was still on a business trip. As for the company with Mu Hongyan overseeing it, he did not need to ask about it. Proportion as a result, he became the most idle person. Of course, this was only on the surface. He still had a lot of things to do. This island nation experience had given him a lot of inspiration and benefited him a lot. Every battle that he had experienced was worth reflecting on. This was very beneficial to his cultivation. In addition, he had already cultivated to the 9th level of Anidia, and was only a step away from the Aurus core stage. This was a very critical moment. He had to cultivate well and condense a golden core. This was an extremely important period for a cultivator. If he failed to condense a golden core, then he would be rejected from entering the golden core stage. He would no longer have the opportunity to improve his cultivation, which would undoubtedly be a fatal blow. Furthermore, the higher the quality of the condensed Aurus core, the faster his future cultivation would be. After class, the few of them ate dinner together. Just as they were about to return to the dormitory, they were stopped by Yi Dingdong's roommates. The three women were like three tigresses who came to denounce them. They already knew that the two of them had broken up. Of course, they believed that Tang Jing had abandoned her and hurt Yi Dingdang. Fortunately, his roommate came to his rescue, and Tang Jing was finally able to escape from the women's battle of words. Of course, he did not blame the three of them. They stood up for Dingdang, and this kind of friendship was rare and precious. It made him feel gratified for Dingdang. He walked around the campus aimlessly, looking at the lush trees and the various teaching buildings hidden under the big trees. He realized that he had not seriously strolled around the campus, and the school was so unfamiliar to him. Thus, he strolled around the campus alone, like a lonely traveler, blending into the beautiful scenery of the campus. Unknowingly, he arrived in front of an office building. He suddenly remembered that Professor Qi Shaowen's office was inside, so he walked in. When he opened the door, he found that the room was full of documents. Professor Qi was buried in all kinds of documents, and his thin body was almost buried by the documents. He flipped through all kinds of documents as if there was no one around. His expression was sometimes excited, sometimes depressed like a madman. Tang Jing was shocked. Didn't Professor Qi already return to work? How did he become like this? He looked even more down and out than before. Professor Qi. Tang Jing called out softly. Professor Qi did not raise his head and said, "You're a delivery man, right? Put the food on the table. The money is on the table, take it yourself." Delivery? Tang Jing was stunned and looked at the table by the door. There was indeed money on the table, and the trash can beside it was full of fast food boxes. He didn't even have time to go out for a meal, and he stayed in the office all this time? Tang Jing was shocked. This was like going crazy. He strode over and snatched the documents from his hands. Professor Qi resisted and tried to take them back, but when he raised his head and saw Tang Jing's face, he was stunned and said, "Tang Jing, why are you here?" Tang Jing did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Professor Qi, what's wrong with you?" "I'm fine. I'm just researching." "There's no need to be so crazy about researching. Your body can't take it." "What's wrong with this? When I was young, I did research for days and nights without sleep." Tang Jing looked at the bony Professor Qi and shook his head. "But you're not the same as when you were young." Professor Qi turned a deaf ear and said, "Tang Jing, you came at the right time. I've made some new discoveries recently and I'm sure you'll be interested." "Professor Qi, it won't be too late for you to rest first." Looking at his appearance, Tang Jing was worried that he would collapse at any moment. Professor Qi was in high spirits and said, "What's the point of resting? That's just a waste of time. Why don't you take a look at this?" Professor Qi pulled out a picture from a pile of documents. "What is this?" Tang Jing took it and looked at it. It was a bronze mask and he felt a sense of déjà vu. He suddenly slapped his head as he finally remembered where this feeling came from. When Professor Qi gave him his first class, he brought a bronze mask. Tang Jing also saw a flow of air in the mask. This flow of air was pure spiritual energy, and after absorbing this spiritual energy, his true Qi actually increased. Not only that, if the spiritual energy was abundant enough, it could also nourish the 9 revolving pill furnace and increase its quality. In short, this spiritual energy was too important. Later on, he saw a similar antique in Old Wei's antique shop, Imperial Treasury. Later on, he found out that these antiques were ancient sacrificial tools, but after that, he never saw another similar antique again, so Tang Jing forgot about it. He never thought that he would see it again today. Moreover, it was clear that the bronze mask in this picture was different from the one he saw before. Seeing Tang Jing's expression change, Professor Qi proudly said, "Haha, I knew you'd be interested." "Professor Qi, did you find this kind of mask again?" Tang Jing curiously asked. Professor Qi nodded, "Of course. Actually, this is a big surprise." "Oh, why do you say that?" Tang Jing was also interested. One day, someone went to Old Wei's Imperial Treasury to sell antiques, and one of the items was this mask. Old Wei remembered that you liked this kind of thing, so he bought it on the spot. However, there was a pleasant surprise, and that was that there was another item, which was this. Professor Qi flipped through another photo. This was a painting that had been taken. On it, there was a rough outline of a scene. This was the construction of a palace. The palace towered into the clouds, and the materials were very large. Giant stones and giant trees, giving people a very shocking feeling. In front of the palace, there was a tall altar, and according to the scale of the picture, this altar was the size of 10 football fields. A group of people stood on the altar, densely packed, but the appearance of these people could not be seen clearly because each of them was wearing a bronze mask. Tang Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. With so many bronze masks, how much spiritual energy did they contain? If they were to absorb it, then the effect would be too great. "How is it?" Professor Qi stared at Tang Jing with a burning gaze, and asked with a bit of pride. Tang Jing suddenly raised his head and stared at Professor Qi. "Is this picture real?" Professor Qi nodded seriously. "This is a documentary picture, and everything in the picture should be compared to the real thing. Although the things in the picture are too shocking, I believe that it is real." Tang Jing also had this kind of intuition. There are many parts of Wuxia's history that are not very clear, and it is intermittent. Especially the ancient era, it is basically blank, and many of them are filled in by myths, as if someone is deliberately hiding the history of the ancient era. However, that period of history is often very fascinating to historians, but there has been no strong evidence to prove or study that period of history. This painting gave me an idea. Perhaps this is the key to unlocking that magnificent and mysterious period of history. Professor Qi's eyes were shining, and his thirsty look made people unable to help but laugh. "Ancient era." Tang Jing subconsciously muttered. He remembered Qiyu 100 Change Star Lord. Weren't they people from the ancient era? They definitely knew about that history, and now Tang Jing's body had the heart of Qiyu. He also urgently wanted to know about that history. In addition, he was also a Skywalker, and Qiyu was also a Skywalker. How did Skywalkers come to be? What secrets did Skywalkers have? Modern people couldn't answer, but maybe if they traced back to the ancient era, they would be able to find something. "Are you interested?" Professor Qi asked. Tang Jing nodded. "Where is the person who sold these antiques?" Professor Qi's face darkened. "Gone." "Gone?" Tang Jing was disappointed. "How can you let him go? This is a big discovery." Professor Qi said helplessly, "I also asked Old Wei the same thing, but at that time he didn't completely discover the value of these antiques, so he didn't let the seller stay, and according to Old Wei, the seller didn't come with good intentions. He was not a good person." Tang Jing didn't care. He himself was not a good person. Why would he be afraid of evil people? "Since Old Wei has seen the seller, then let's go find him and see if we can find any useful information. Also, these antiques must be with him. I can also go and take a look," Tang Jing said impatiently. Professor Qi's face lit up with joy. "Okay." The two of them immediately took the photos and rushed out, heading straight to Old Wei's Imperial Treasure House. At dusk, the two of them finally arrived at their destination. They saw Old Wei sitting at the door with his legs crossed and a cup of tea in his hand, looking at the people coming and going. There were still a few customers in the shop, but with the waiter taking care of them, he didn't need to worry about them. When he saw the two of them, Old Wei put down the cup of tea and quickly walked over. He couldn't help but look at Tang Jing with joy. Young Master Tang, what a rare guest. Old Wei, you are wrong, we have been friends for more than 10 years, you are not as friendly to me as you are to Tang Zheng, Professor Qi joked. Chapter 721. After the host and guest sat down, Tang Zheng impatiently took out the photo and asked, Old Wei, is this still with you? Old Wei immediately beamed with joy and said, Of course it is. When young Master Tang was interested in this kind of thing, I took note of it. This time there was a seller selling it, so I directly bought it. Saying this, he directly took out a bronze mask from a wooden box. Tang Zheng took the mask and was overjoyed. This was indeed the thing he was looking for. On top of the mask there was a flow of spiritual energy. When his hand touched the mask, the spiritual energy quickly merged into his body and turned into true qi. Seeing Tang Zheng's pleasantly surprised expression, Old Wei's heart finally fell to the ground. Those in the antique business made friends with people from all walks of life. Of course there was no lack of trouble. If he could have a strong helper like Tang Zheng, then there would be less trouble in the future. That was why Old Wei spent so much effort to befriend Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng, what do you think? Professor Qi curiously asked. Tang Zheng suddenly raised his head and handed the mask to Old Wei and nodded, This is it. Professor Qi smiled and said, I told you my eyes were right. Wasn't it because I recognized it first? Otherwise, it would have slipped away from under my nose. Old Wei said as if he wanted to take credit. Professor Qi said, You've got good taste this time, all right? We came here for more important things. Old Wei smiled mysteriously and blinked. I already guessed that you would come looking for me. Professor Qi raised his eyebrows. You can even predict? Then why don't you tell us why we came looking for you? Old Wei's finger tapped on the bronze mask a few times and said with a mysterious smile, You came to ask about the origin of these things? Didn't you say you didn't know? Professor Qi asked. Haha, is there anything in the antique business that I don't know? Old Wei boasted. So you know. Then why did you say you didn't know when I asked you last time? Professor Qi glared at him and asked. Old Wei wagged his finger and said, See, I don't understand your fiery temper. If I had told you back then, it might not have been a good thing for you. Now that young Master Tang is back, it's a different story. Professor Qi frowned and said, What exactly are you up to? Seeing that Tang Zheng was also listening attentively, Old Wei did not keep him in suspense. He coughed lightly and said, Listen carefully, the sellers of these things are not good people. They are grave robbers. Grave robber? Tang Zheng and Professor Qi cried out in alarm at the same time. As a serious ancient examiner, they hated tomb robbers very much. For the sake of benefits, these people wantonly destroyed ancient tombs and cultural relics. Many of the ancient tombs that they stole were in a mess, and many of the precious cultural relics were destroyed. This was the most pitiful thing for the ancient examiner. Moreover, grave robbers often sold cultural relics overseas for profit. This kind of behavior was outrageous. Immediately, Professor Qi flew into a rage and said, Then why don't you call the police and arrest these people? Old Wei shook his head and smiled bitterly. Old Qi, I'm an antique shop. Unlike you, an archaeology professor, it's possible for us to deal with these people in our line of work. If I call the police, how can I survive in this line of work in the future? Every line of work has its own rules. People in the martial arts world have no choice. Professor Qi was startled when he heard this. He also knew that his words were too businesslike. As an authority in the archaeology world, he understood the twists and turns in it. He knew that Old Wei's words were not false. Moreover, these grave robbers are all bloodthirsty. If they know that I'm the one who called the police, I'm afraid that my old life will be in their hands in the end. Old Wei added. Professor Qi's face turned red and said, Old Wei, I didn't think it through. Please don't take it to heart. As an old friend for decades, he naturally did not want Old Wei to put himself in danger. Do you think I don't know you well? Old Wei waved his hand indifferently. His gaze turned and fell on Tang Zheng. Young Master Tang is different. I'll tell young Master Tang about these grave robbers. You will definitely have a way to deal with them. Tang Zheng smiled faintly and nodded. Old Wei is very thoughtful. It's just a group of grave robbers. Of course I have a way. Old Wei clapped his hands and smiled. Good. This group of grave robbers is quite large. I've sent people to follow them for a while. They're active in Beijing, but according to my observations, they're preparing for their next operation. Furthermore, I heard that they're going to rob a large ancient tomb. Then we can't let them leave Beijing. We have to capture them immediately and interrogate them to find out where these things came from. Tang Jing said impatiently. Professor Qi also nodded. That's right. We can't let them rob the next ancient tomb. Looking at the two men's impatient and indignant expressions, Old Wei quickly stopped them. Don't be hasty. Things aren't as simple as you think. If you want to know the origin of these things, don't act rashly. I've already found out that they are going to rob the same ancient tomb as the last one. These things were stolen from that ancient tomb. It's just that they didn't prepare enough last time, so they only took a little bit of the loot. This time they are going to do something big. That's why they bought a lot of equipment and materials. Tang Jing and Professor Qi looked at each other. They were overjoyed. This way they would be able to find the source. As long as they could find that ancient tomb, they might be able to find the answers that they had been looking for. Tang Jing was very excited. If they could really solve many of the ancient secrets or the secrets of the Skywalkers, then it would be very important to him. It was even more important than increasing his cultivation by a few levels. Professor Qi rubbed his palms together and said, So you're saying that we have to follow them all the way, like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind? Old Wei nodded, Of course. Then hurry up and tell us the location. We will follow those damn tomb robbers. Old Qi, don't be so anxious. If you act too hastily and alert the enemy, then the gains won't make up for the losses. Old Wei hurriedly advised, This group of people won't leave the capital so soon. They're still preparing. When they are about to leave, I will inform young Master Tang and he will follow them. I want to go too. Professor Qi volunteered. Old Wei frowned. Old Qi, you are not a young man anymore. You will definitely not be safe if you follow those tomb robbers. Are you sure your body can do it? It will be bad if you cause trouble for young Master Tang. Now I have to go. Professor Qi insisted. The temptation this time was too big. Professor Qi couldn't resist at all. Looking at his stubborn eyes, Tang Jing's heart moved. It's okay, I will take care of you when the time comes. Professor Qi had helped him so much, so how could Tang Jing leave him alone? Even if it was a little more burden, he didn't care. In fact, Tang Jing had another idea in his mind. Why don't he just directly knock on their door and force them to tell him the location of the ancient tomb? But after thinking about it, these tomb robbers still had accomplices, so he had to cast a long line to catch a big fish and catch them all in one fell swoop. He couldn't let any fish escape the net, otherwise it would be a disaster for the archaeological world. Seeing that Tang Jing had agreed, Professor Qi was ecstatic. He shook Tang Jing's hand excitedly. Old Wei helplessly shook his head and could only agree. All right, take out that painting and let Tang Jing take a look. Professor Qi urged. Old Wei took out another painting. This painting was already somewhat damaged. Tang Jing glanced at it and found that there was no movement of spiritual energy, but seeing the painting with his own eyes, he still felt deeply shaken. The towering palace, the huge altar, and the mysterious sacrificial ceremony all exuded a mysterious aura. This painting doesn't have any spiritual energy. It seems that not everything in the ancient tomb contains spiritual energy. Tang Jing came to a conclusion. He wasn't disappointed. Instead, he felt that it was normal. If everything contained spiritual energy, it would be an unimaginable amount. After chatting for a while, he left and went back to wait for Old Wei's news. Since there were still a few days before departure, Tang Jing decided not to return to the dormitory. He decided to use this time to calm down and cultivate. Where was the best place to cultivate in the capital? Of course, it was the Imperial City. Moreover, his Dragon God technique had made a breakthrough and he had gained a lot in the Langya Pavilion. It was a good opportunity to communicate with the five-clawed golden dragon. The Imperial City was particularly quiet at night. Without the hustle and bustle of tourists during the day, it was like a sleeping lion. He went to the bottom of the Imperial City with ease and saw the five-clawed golden dragon. However, the five-clawed golden dragon complained to him. This was because he didn't bring Xiao Bai with him. The five-clawed golden dragon seemed to have established a deep friendship with Xiao Bai. Although the five-clawed golden dragon still didn't understand Xiao Bai's origins. However, the five-clawed golden dragon's attention was attracted by Tang Jing's cultivation. In just a few days, Tang Jing had risen several levels. More importantly, his Dragon God technique had actually reached the 3rd level. The five-clawed golden dragon's huge eyes widened. Although it had already expected this, it was still shocked by this rocket-like speed. He chattered and excitedly said that he would see the light of day soon. After it calmed down for a while, Tang Jing talked about what he had seen and heard in the island nation. When he mentioned the Yamata no Orochi, the five-clawed golden dragon's eyes immediately lit up. It exclaimed, "You saw the Yamata no Orochi? Seeing his big reaction, Tang Zheng was quite curious and asked, "Yes, isn't it said that the Yamada no Orochi almost transformed into a 9-clawed golden dragon? It's more powerful than you, right?" The 5-clawed golden dragon nodded and said, "Of course it's more powerful than me." This matter caused quite a stir in the dragon clan. If such a murderous Yamada no Orochi transformed into a dragon, it would be the greatest irony and insult to the dragon clan. However, wasn't he destroyed by a mysterious person in the end? So, your dragon clan should thank this person. Tang Jing joked. The 5-clawed golden dragon nodded seriously. Yes, but do you know who this person is? Chapter 722. Seeing Tang Jing shake his head, the 5-clawed golden dragon smiled as if he had already expected this reaction. He solemnly said, "This person is the first emperor of the human world, Qin Shi Huang." Qin Shi Huang? Tang Jing was startled. Anyone who studied history would know this person. In the past, Wuxia was filled with warlords and 7 countries roamed freely. Qin Shi Huang established a prosperous era and destroyed the 6 countries, unifying the world. From then on, Wuxia entered a new era. So he was the one who broke Yamada no Orochi's dream of transforming into a dragon. Tang Jing sighed. This generation's hero was truly extraordinary. Of course, this matter was not recorded in history. Let me tell you, the Qin Shi Huang that you humans know is only the tip of the iceberg. You don't even know his true identity. Why was he able to destroy the 6 countries and unify the world? At that time, the world was filled with experts. What did he rely on to accomplish this? The 5-clawed golden dragon continued to ask. Tang Jing was confused. How could he know these things? At that time, Wuxia was filled with cultivators. Each country had a large number of experts. You can imagine how terrifying that battle was and how powerful each country was. But Qin Shi Huang was able to accomplish this in a short 10 years. What he relied on was his identity. What identity? Tang Jing's eyes shined as he asked. A celestial. What? A celestial? Tang Jing was shocked. He almost jumped up. How could there be another celestial? Qi was a celestial. How could Qin Shi Huang also be a celestial? Ah, you're also a celestial. How could you be scared? The 5-clawed golden dragon laughed. Tang Jing helplessly smiled. It was precisely because he was a celestial that he was scared. The identity of a celestial was filled with too many unknowns. Is being a celestial not good? How many people dream of being a celestial? The 5-clawed golden dragon disapprovingly said. You said that Qin Shi Huang's identity as a celestial had something to do with unifying the world. What is the connection? Tang Jing changed the topic. The 5-clawed golden dragon unhappily glared at him and said, "Of course it has something to do with it. Skywalker's cultivation speed is extremely fast. They are blessed by the heavens. They will always do something that will shake the heavens and shake the earth. This is destined to be an extraordinary life. What is so strange about unifying the world? Then why didn't he live a long life?" The 5-clawed golden dragon sighed and said, "A celestial's cultivation is profound, and their lifespan is naturally not short. However, Qin Shi Huang unified the world and killed who knows how many people. The sin of killing was too heavy, and it harmed the harmony of the heavens. The heavens punished him, and even though he was a celestial, he couldn't live to 100 years old. You should know that he sent people everywhere to search for the immortal recipe for immortality, but in the end they still found nothing. This is his fate." Tang Jing sighed faintly. A prodigy of a generation had fallen just like that. However, the matter of killing caused Tang Jing to become vigilant, and he asked curiously, "Isn't the world of cultivators a place where the strong preys on the weak? Why can't we kill?" "Of course you can." The 5-clawed golden dragon said, "It's just that Qin Shi Huang's sin of killing is too heavy. The number of people who died in his hands is no less than 1,000,000. This kind of sin of killing is not something that the heavens can tolerate. With 1,000,000 lonely souls haunting him, ordinary people would have died a long time ago. It is already commendable that he could live for so long." Tang Jing heaved a sigh of relief. This did not affect him much. He was not a homicidal maniac. How could he kill so many people? Moreover, he was not in a hurry to save people, especially to the general public. He was still benevolent. Since Qin Shi Huang was so powerful, why didn't he directly kill Yamada no Orochi and let it escape? The 5-clawed golden dragon snorted and said, "You think too simply. Do you know how powerful Yamada no Orochi was when it transformed into a dragon? In this world, except for Qin Shi Huang, there is no second person who can do this. Moreover, Qin Shi Huang was haunted by a million lonely souls and his strength was greatly reduced, so dealing with Yamada no Orochi was already very difficult. Letting Yamada no Orochi escape was also something that he had no choice but to do. Tang Jing sighed regretfully and said, "What a pity. If we had killed Yamada no Orochi back then there wouldn't have been so many things after that. Perhaps there wouldn't have been so many deaths in that war a few decades ago. Everything in the world, every bite and every drink has its own destiny. How can there be so many perfect things?" The five-clawed golden dragon said. In the next few days, Tang Jing attended classes during the day and cultivated in the imperial city at night. His cultivation improved more and more, but he was still a step away from the Aura's core stage. However, his cultivation had already been completely consolidated and he had also digested the gains he had gained during this period of time. Especially the changes in the War Soul Sword, he was pleasantly surprised. The black spots on it were getting fewer and fewer, and the dazzling sword body was slowly being exposed, as if it was undergoing a transformation. During this time, Yan Luyun invited him to a meal and even went to Ji Wuxiang's clubhouse. However, this time he did not see this mysterious Ji Wuxiang. Tang Jing's relationship with the Yin family was getting deeper and deeper. Tang Jing also found out another thing, and that was that the Ye family seemed to be walking together with the Song family again. Back then, because of the marriage between Song Yu and Yi Dingdang, the two families were at odds with each other. Who would have thought that they would be close again today? Yan Luyun directly evaluated that there were no eternal enemies between the great families, only eternal interests. The two families had come together again because they had a common interest. In this way, among the four great families in Beijing, the Yan family was isolated. The Yi and Chu families and the Song family had joined forces, and the Song family's strength had taken a qualitative leap. They were already able to contend with and even suppress the Yan family. Looking at Yan Luyun's indignant expression, Tang Jing thoughtfully said, "Young Master Yan, please pass on a message to Elder Yan. If there is anything I can help with, I will do my best." Yan Luyun was overjoyed. He had been waiting for these words. The Yan family had placed all their chips on Tang Jing. Of course, they hoped that he could return the favor and repay them. Currently, these words were full of rewards. Tang Jing obviously knew the Yan family's thoughts, but he did not reject them. People always needed allies, and this ally of the Yan family was very important to him. After coming back, he had been contacting Tian Chanzi. This old man seemed to have disappeared from the world. There was no news and he was helpless. Of course, he also contacted Fang Shishir. She was doing well abroad and the Rockefeller family did not do anything to her. Everything was very peaceful. Mu Hongyan personally came to the school to report the company's operation situation to him. Everything was going well. With the cooperation of the Yan family, everything was going smoothly. Moreover, Linga was also doing well in the entertainment circle. Since the incident with Ji Wuxiang's club last time, Linger's path to stardom had been smooth. Releasing albums, shooting movies, everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Her popularity had soared, and she was already recognized as a rising star in the entertainment circle. However, there were also things that occasionally caused ripples in Tang Jing's heart, and that was when he bumped into Yi Dingdang a few times on campus. However, Yi Dingdang completely treated him as air, brushing past him and never looking at him again, causing him to sigh. He had already been repeatedly urged by the five-clawed golden dragon to bring Xiao Bai to the imperial palace. In order to not listen to its nagging, Tang Jing decided to go home once. Moreover, he specifically chose to go home during the day in order to avoid meeting Princess Anne. When he opened the door as expected, he did not see Princess Annie. Marshall and Lil White were both at home, and when they saw him, a hint of pleasant surprise flashed through the depths of Marshall's eyes. Like a little wife who had reunited after a long time, they warmly welcomed him. Xiao Bai jumped onto his shoulder, hugged his head and kept scratching it, as if complaining that he had not come back to play with it during this period of time. "I came back this time to bring Xiao Bai out," Tang Jing said. When Xiao Bai heard this, he was extremely happy and squeaked non-stop. A hint of disappointment flashed across Wu's eyes. So he didn't come to see him. Tang Jing immediately saw through her thoughts and hurriedly held her hand and said, "I missed you too. I came back to see you." Wu's eyes immediately surged with intense joy as he looked at him with a burning gaze. Tang Jing's gaze inadvertently landed on Wu's hand. The huge scar immediately attracted all of his attention. He patted his head. He was truly muddle-headed. How could he forget about this matter? The scars on Wu's hands and chest were like ugly centipedes lying on her fair skin. It was a ghastly sight, and every time he saw it, it was like torture. There was no need to mention it to Wu. He had already said that he would remove these scars for her, but he had actually forgotten about it. There was no time like the present. He had to settle this matter today. Seeing him staring straight at his hand, the scar was shocking. Wu was shocked. As if he had been electrocuted, he immediately retracted his hand and hid it behind his back. His face became somewhat pale. Letting the person she loved see her ugly place was something that no woman was willing to do. Wu was no exception. "Wu, I'll heal you right now and remove these scars." Tang Jing grabbed her hand again, his fingers gently brushing across the scar. Wu's entire body trembled unnaturally, but when he felt Tang Jing's tenderness, he could not bear to break free. When the two of them returned to the bedroom, Tang Jing immediately activated his true qi to wrap around the scar, slowly melting the blood clots in the scar. The scar disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, but after that, no matter how much true qi he activated, he was unable to completely remove the scar. Tang Jing was not depressed, because Tian Chanzi had once said that the scar would need to be healed many times before it could be completely removed, so there was no need to rush it. Seeing that the scar on his hand had been healed, Tang Jing's gaze subconsciously fell on Wu's chest. Wu's beautiful face could not help but turn red. In order to heal the wound on his chest, he had to take off his clothes. Although the two of them had skin-to-skin contact, it was still embarrassing. "Let me help you," Tang Jing said gently, but from the corner of his eyes, he caught a glimpse of Xiao Bai staring at him with wide eyes. He immediately kicked it into the bedroom and could not help but laugh as he scolded, "You little pervert, you still want to peek? Where is your place?" Bang. The door closed, leaving only the two of them in the room. Wu could not help but laugh and said, "How would Xiao Bai know about those things?" "Don't think so badly of it. Don't be fooled by its pure appearance. It knows no less than you. Come, move your hand, I'll take off your clothes." Tang Jing said carelessly and did not avoid it. His hands naturally landed on the buttons. Chapter 723. The buttons were like little fairies, lightly jumping out of the buttonhole. The shirt was torn open and the whiteness inside could be clearly seen. Wu's face flushed red. She wished she could find a hole to hide in. Killing enemies on the battlefield was not as uncomfortable. But in order to get rid of that ugly scar, she could only endure it. She secretly sized up Tang Jing and found that his eyes were as clear as water, without the slightest bit of desire, just like a doctor treating a patient. She could not help but heave a sigh of relief, but also feel a little disappointed. Not long later, Marshall's chest was completely exposed in front of Tang Jing's eyes. Although he had seen it a few times, it was still so beautiful that it could captivate one's soul. Tang Jing took a deep breath and gently covered his chest with his palm. The warm and delicate feeling caused his heart to ripple. True qi gushed out and wrapped around the wound. The warm feeling made Marshall feel comfortable and even more alluring. Tang Jing calmed himself down with great difficulty and managed to suppress the impulsive demon in his heart. Only then did he complete the healing process. The scar had already faded. After a few more treatments, it would definitely recover to its original state, perfect and flawless. Marshall could not help but look down at her chest, her beautiful eyes shining. The effect was immediate and she could not help but exclaim, "How magical!" Tang Jing smiled and said, "Of course it's magical. After a few more treatments, it will be completely healed." After saying that, he could not help but swallow his saliva. The temptation was too strong. Seeing his appearance, Marshall's cheeks flushed red. She hurriedly grabbed her clothes to cover her chest and said coquettishly, "You're not allowed to look." This action of wanting to welcome and rejecting was extremely flirtatious. Tang Jing's originally restless flame immediately jumped up, and he threw her onto the bed and said, "I want to see." "Are you?" Marshall was shocked. She covered her chest with both hands, completely losing her usual cold-killing intent. "Quickly get up. It's broad daylight. What if someone sees us?" What are you afraid of in broad daylight? Who would look?" Tang Jing laughed sinisterly. "No way." Wu Yin firmly refused, but before he could finish, his lips were sealed by Tang Jing's mouth. It was not as violent as a storm but was exceptionally gentle. Wu's heart immediately softened as she recalled the kiss on the island nation. Just a single kiss had almost melted her body and mind. It was the same this time. This kind of gentle kiss made her unable to resist at all. Although she was usually decisive, when it came to matters between a man and a woman, she reacted strangely to this kind of gentleness and was especially sensitive. When the conditions were right, success came naturally. There was no storm-like attack. The two of them were like a river flowing into the ocean, merging into each other's bodies and even their souls. After a long time, the wind stopped and the rain stopped. Tang Jing hugged the naked marshal and took a deep breath. After this round of exchange, he had absorbed a lot of purine qi. He realized that after his cultivation had greatly increased, the speed at which he absorbed purine qi had also become faster. Of course, the pure yang qi in his body had also increased even faster. The harmony of yin and yang had temporarily reached a fragile balance, but it could be broken at any time. How's your pure yang qi? Wu Qingchu laid on Tang Jing's chest and asked with concern. Tang Jing rubbed her smooth jade back and said with a smile, with you here, the pure yang qi will not be able to rebel. It has long been tamed by you. Wu Xian was embarrassed. She fiercely pinched the muscles on his waist and said angrily, you're really bad. Crick. Suddenly, a clear sound caused the two of them to immediately fall into silence. The two of them had excellent hearing and could easily hear the commotion outside the door. They looked at each other and whispered, why is there someone here? It must be Yin who came back. She's not at school in the middle of the day, so why did she run home? Tang Jing said unhappily. Marshall was both embarrassed and anxious. She fiercely pinched Tang Jing and said, it's all your fault, doing such shameful things in broad daylight. Now that you've been caught, how am I supposed to face her in the future? Anyway, she knows about our relationship. What are you afraid of? Tang Jing simply beat her at her own game and distanced himself from Anne. No, hurry up and jump out of the window. This height won't be a problem for you. Wu Kai refused and quickly pushed Tang Jing out of the bed. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he stood naked on the bed and complained, is there a need for that? Yes. Marshall said decisively. Crack. But just as he finished speaking, the door was turned and the door was pushed open. Princess Anne stood at the door and said, you're home. Ah. Before she could finish her sentence, her voice turned into a scream. Her eyes stared straight at Tang Jing's body. *CK. Tang Jing felt a chill on his back and reacted quickly. He immediately crawled back into bed and shouted, what are you doing? Marshall was already stunned. He quickly covered his head with the blanket and began to deceive himself like an ostrich. Anne's scream was finally interrupted, but her eyes still looked as if she had seen a ghost. She stared at the messy bed and exclaimed, you two in broad daylight, close the door. You're invading my privacy, do you know that? Tang Jing roared in annoyance, and seemed to have awoken from a dream as she slammed the door shut. She clutched her chest as her heart pounded violently. She was a princess and had lived in the West since she was young, so she definitely had some education in this area. However, this was the first time she had seen a real man's body, so she was naturally quite frightened. However, her nerves were still very tenacious. After a while, she came back to her senses and smacked her lips. Everyone says that Eastern men can't do it. I don't think they're that bad. Inside the room, Tang Jing carried Marshall out of bed. Everyone's gone. What are you hiding in there for? It's all your fault. If you woke up earlier, everything would have been fine. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't over yet. However, he was at a disadvantage. She had actually seen it all. He had suffered a great loss. Since it has already happened, there's no point in running away. It's not like there's anything wrong with it. Moreover, this matter is her fault. She barged into someone's room and didn't respect their privacy at all. Tang Jing said righteously. Anyway, I'm not going out today. If you want to go out, then go out. Marshall grabbed the blanket to cover his body and said resolutely. You're not even afraid of going into battle to kill the enemy. What's there to be afraid of? Tang Jing didn't understand her. How can that be the same? Marshall asked. Tang Jing was helpless and said, all right, if you don't go out, I'll go out. I want to see what she can do to me. Tang Jing's skin was thick. How could he be scared by a woman to the point that he didn't dare to leave the room? Dressed neatly, he walked out as if nothing had happened. Seeing and staring straight at him, he took the initiative and said, and do you know what privacy is? You are seriously invading my privacy. As expected, when she heard the word privacy and immediately apologized, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were at home and I didn't know you were doing that. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have barged in. This is my fault. I apologize. Her sincere attitude made Tang Jing feel a little embarrassed. Tang Jing resentfully waved his hand and said, since it's your first offense, I won't pursue it. Why don't you go to school in the middle of the day and run home? You're still talking about me. Aren't you at home too? I don't have class today. Princess rolled her eyes and said, I don't have class either. You promised to bring me around the capital last time, but you still haven't fulfilled your promise. Tang Jing was shocked. You've already seen the matter between me and Marshall, why are you still sticking to me to bring you around the capital? When did I promise you? Tang Jing refused. Last time I told you about Yi Ding Dang. Hearing the 3 words Yi Ding Dang, Tang Jing's mood immediately dropped and said, I didn't promise you, that's what you said. After saying that, he returned to his room and bid farewell to Marshall. Marshall also wished that he could leave quickly, otherwise, it would be awkward if An saw him. Tang Jing brought Xiao Bai and left amidst An's angry denunciations. In the next few days, Tang Jing took the time to treat Marshall's injuries. Those scars finally disappeared and she regained her former beauty. When An saw this change, she was so shocked that her chin almost fell to the ground. She understood the international biomedical information very well, especially the treatment of scars. There had never been such an immediate effect. This was simply a miracle in the history of medicine. She kept asking Tang Jing how he did it, but Tang Jing completely ignored her and directly slipped away, causing An to stomp her feet in anger. The peaceful days were short-lived. Old Wei's call finally came, informing him that the grave robbers were ready to leave. It was just a group of grave robbers, so Tang Jing did not put them in his eyes, so he left Little White in the Imperial City to accompany the 5-clawed golden dragon. Marshall also stayed at home to cultivate the fire underworld palm. Ever since he had seen the actual power of the fire underworld palm, he had been training even harder. Driving to the school to pick up Professor Qi, he found that he had prepared a lot of things. It was obvious that he had made sufficient preparations during this period of time. Is there a need to be so exaggerated? Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Professor Qi nodded seriously, of course there is. This time we are going to the wild and we are exploring an ancient tomb. There are only the 2 of us and we don't know what kind of unexpected situation we will encounter, so we have to be fully prepared. All right. But there's no need to carry so many bags. I'll keep them for you first. Tang Jing waved his arm and all the luggage disappeared into thin air. Professor Qi was flabbergasted. Although he already knew Tang Jing's identity and knew that he had a lot of divine arts, he still couldn't help but be shocked when he saw this move. The 2 of them arrived at the place where they had agreed to meet up with Old Wei. Old Wei had been waiting for a long time and quickly came forward to welcome them. Seeing the 2 of them empty hands, he frowned and said, Are you going to go empty-handed like this? The luggage is with him. Professor Qi pointed at Tang Jing. Old Wei looked at Tang Jing with a strange expression. Tang Jing didn't want to explain and asked first, Where are the grave robbers? Chapter 724. 5 or 6 people walked out with big and small bags and got into 2 off-road vehicles. Tang Jing furrowed his brows. Although they were separated by a street, he could still feel the murderous aura from them. There was also a strong yin energy. This meant that not only were their hands stained with blood, but they had also been in a graveyard full of yin energy all year round. That was why they were so stained with yin energy. They really are grave robbers. A cold light flashed in Tang Jing's eyes. He was like a lurking tiger staring at a pack of wolves. Virum. The off-road vehicle started, and with a graceful swerve of its tail, it sped away, leaving behind a trail of dust. Professor Qi hurriedly urged Tang Jing, Quick, don't lose them. We can't run away. Sit tight. Tang Jing also started the car. The roar of the engine made people's blood boil. This car was specially prepared for him by Mu Hongyan. It had been carefully modified, and its performance was much better than other cars. Old Qi, be careful, Old Wei said worriedly. Professor Qi's face was red as if he had a second spring. He waved his hand proudly and said, Don't worry, wait for my triumphant return. This discovery will definitely shock the world. He was full of confidence like a fighter. Virum. Tang Jing started the car and roared away, following the grave robbers from afar. One in front and one behind, the 2 groups of people drove out of the capital and onto the highway. Tang Jing looked at the road signs. These people were heading south. As for their destination, it was unknown. The grave robbers were very vigilant. If not for Tang Jing being careful, he would have been discovered several times. Night fell. The grave robber got off the highway and stopped in front of a small hotel. What do we do? Professor Qi asked. Tang Jing was bold and said, Let's go to the hotel. They haven't seen us before, so there's no need to be afraid. Professor Qi was eager to try. This was an unprecedented experience. He was so excited that his cheeks were red. He rubbed his hands and said, "We'll have to face the grave robbers in a while." Tang Jing patted his shoulder and said, "Professor Chi, calm down. It's just a few grave robbers." Professor Chi said disapprovingly, "You don't know how much archaeologists hate grave robbers. If we can catch them with the stolen goods and hand them over to the police, it will be a great deed." "Okay, after it's done we'll hand them over to the police," Tang Jing promised. By the time the two of them got out of the car, the grave robber had already checked in. He watched the other party go upstairs from afar. Professor Chi's eyes were fixed on the back of the grave robber. His eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. Cough. Tang Jing coughed lightly and reminded Professor Chi to pay attention because the hotel owner was already paying attention to them. Professor Chi blushed and quickly retracted his gaze. 2 rooms? Tang Jing handed over the money and documents. The boss looked at the two of them deeply, went through the registration procedures with a straight face, and then handed the two of them 2 access cards. There was no need to expect any service from the owner of such a small hotel. Anyway, the two of them didn't care about that. They took the room card and went upstairs. "Which room are they staying in?" Professor Chi asked in a low voice. "The 3rd floor, right next to us. They booked 3 rooms." Tang Jing's hearing was excellent. The soundproofing of such a small hotel was not very good. He could already vaguely hear the grave robber's voice. However, the other party deliberately lowered their voices so he couldn't hear what they were saying. "Sigh, it's such a waste for the two of us to get 2 rooms." Professor Chi looked at the room card in his hand, came back to his senses and muttered. Tang Jing smiled slightly but did not explain the reason. The last time he entered the 100,000 Mountains with Professor Chi and the others, he had a deep impression of Professor Chi. He especially liked to snore. It was earth-shattering and made it difficult for people to sleep. He didn't want to endure that kind of destruction again, so he deliberately booked 2 rooms. After they entered their rooms, Tang Jing was a little tired after driving all the way. He ate a little and went to sleep. In a daze, he was suddenly awakened by a noise, mixed with Professor Chi's exclamation. Tang Jing jumped out of bed like a carp and quickly opened the door, only to see a lot of people crowded in the corridor. They blocked Professor Chi's door and were shouting fiercely. Tang Jing's heart tightened. Could it be that something happened to Professor Chi? He quickly squeezed through the crowd and shouted, "Make way, make way." Finally, he squeezed through the door, only to see Professor Chi being forced into a corner by a few people. His clothes were messy, and there was a woman sitting on the bed with her hair blown dry. This woman had heavy makeup and an extremely short skirt, revealing 2 white thighs. Seeing this scene, Tang Jing was stunned. What was going on? "Old man, you look so serious but your mind is so dirty. Seeing that my sister is beautiful, you want to take advantage of her, right? Let me tell you, if you don't give us an explanation today, don't even think about leaving." A bald man roared fiercely. The bald man was shirtless and there was a big gold chain around his neck. Coupled with his big pockmarked face, it was obvious that he was a gangster. Tang Jing was confused. How could Professor Chi have a conflict with this group of people? Moreover, the woman on the bed was too eye-catching. What the hell was going on? But no matter what, he had to save Professor Chi first. Professor Chi was so angry that his face and ears were red. He glared at them and retorted hoarsely, "You're slandering me." "It's obvious that you're the ones who controlled the girl to do those dirty things. I want to call the police. I want the police to arrest you." Professor Chi's voice was loud and righteous, but it made the group of people's eyes shine fiercely. They shouted unscrupulously, "Where did this old man come from? You dare to call the police? When the police come, don't even think about pleasing them." When Tang Jing heard this, his heart suddenly lit up and he finally guessed that the woman was actually a young lady who came out to sell herself, and Professor Chi was impossible. With Tang Jing's understanding of him, other than being obsessed with archaeology, this old man would not have much interest in women, let alone at his age, he would not be able to do anything, and his taste would not be that low. This was a trap, an immortal's trap. Although Tang Jing had never really encountered it, he had made many friends with people from all walks of life. He still knew a little about this kind of dirty trick. Perhaps the two of them had been targeted since they entered the hotel. The boss must have been in cahoots with this group of people. When he saw that the two of them were foreigners, he had evil intentions. He must have thought that the old man was easy to fool and chose to target Professor Chi. Tang Jing's face sank. This group of people was really King shameless. They actually dared to target Professor Chi. This old man had done research all his life and must have valued his reputation very much. Now that he was slandered as a prostitute, it would be worse than death. Tang Jing did not delay and rushed over with large strides. The few burly men only felt their bodies sway and were pushed aside. The next second they saw a young man standing in front of the old man. The bald man stared and disdainfully said, "Oh, you actually have an accomplice. So what? This old man bullied my little sister. If he doesn't give an explanation, no one can step out of this door." Tang Jing turned a deaf ear and supported Professor Qi. "Professor Qi, what is going on?" Hearing Tang Jing call him professor, the bald man became even more arrogant. It was as if he had eaten stimulants. He shouted loudly, "So it's still a professor. A beast with a human face. I think it's more like a beast. If you don't give me an explanation, I'll go to your unit and ask for an explanation." The bald man was an experienced person. He was ecstatic. This time he had really picked up a treasure. This kind of person was most afraid of people going to his unit to cause trouble. In order to keep the peace, he had to give enough lottery tickets. The bald man's eyes were red. It was as if he could see a sky full of money flying towards him like a fairy scattering flowers. Professor Qi indignantly explained the whole story. It turned out that when he was resting, he suddenly heard someone knocking on the door. When he opened the door, he saw a woman with heavy makeup. The other party rushed into his room without saying anything and tried to sell him her services. Although Professor Qi was obsessed with research, he still knew that the other party was a woman who had lost her virginity. Although this group of people often appeared in the news, it was the first time he had seen it. It was very fresh. Of course, he definitely did not have any improper thoughts. He just felt that the other party was very pitiful, so he tried his best to persuade her to take the right path. He even promised to find a job for her when he returned to Beijing. He never thought that his love would harm himself. The door was pushed open with a bang, and then a group of people surrounded him fiercely. They insisted that Professor Qi was an old man who did not respect himself and bullied a woman. Professor Qi was a scholar who met a soldier. He could not explain himself clearly and was unable to defend himself. He was said to be useless by the other party. His part-time job was to call a beast with a human face but a beast's heart. Seeing Tang Jing, Professor Qi's heart finally returned to his stomach. He grabbed Tang Jing's hand and explained, "Don't believe their words. I'm really wronged." Tang Jing smiled coldly and glanced at the people opposite him. "Of course I know you're wronged. This group of people came with ill intentions. They're obviously here to extort money. Professor Qi, you've been fooled." Professor Qi's face was bitter. Although he was a titan in the archaeological world, he was helpless in the face of these things. He said dejectedly, "Then what should we do?" "Pay up. You have to pay up." The bald man shouted first. "Professor Qi, sit on the chair and rest. I'll take care of it." Tang Jing comforted him. He turned his eyes and saw a few familiar faces at the door. It was the group of grave robbers. One of the grave robbers pointed at the dejected Professor Qi and whispered to him. Tang Jing's heart trembled as he had a bad premonition. As expected, the grave robber looked at Tang Jing and Professor Qi warily, then turned around and left. "I've been exposed." Although Tang Jing did not know how the other party found out, he was still exposed. This matter was troublesome. However, he did not have time to chase after them. He was stopped by the bald man and a group of people. Each of them was like a pack of wolves, staring at Tang Jing with glowing eyes. "Want to escape? No way. Close the door." Chapter 725. The group of people glared at Tang Jing and Professor Qi as if they were lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They wanted to say a few words to keep up appearances, but Tang Jing did not give them a chance. Like a fierce tiger coming down the mountain, he rushed into the crowd with a whoosh. With a raise of his hand and a fall of his fist, one by one, they immediately turned into pig heads. Tang Jing pulled Professor Qi up and shouted, "Let's go." The two of them swaggered out of the room, leaving only a mess in the room and the woman who was sitting on the bed dumbfounded. Where are they? However, when the two of them came downstairs, they found that the grave robber's car was gone. Without a doubt, the other party must have noticed something and slipped away without stopping. Professor Qi was dumbfounded. It was as if a basin of ice water had been poured over his head. His enthusiasm turned to nothing. He stomped his feet in hatred and said regretfully, "It's all my fault. Why should I be so kind? Now that the person in the car are gone, how am I supposed to follow them?" Tang Jing's face was sullen as he looked around. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes slightly and stared at a sneaky person in the distance. He strode over. The other party immediately wanted to hide behind the counter, but in the end Tang Jing dragged him out. "Boss, you were the one who led the people upstairs, right?" Tang Jing asked with a fake smile. 8 less than or equal to. The boss was so scared that he trembled. He had secretly run upstairs to take a look. When he saw the defeated soldiers wailing on the ground, his blood almost froze. He knew that this time he had kicked an iron plate. The other party was not a harmless lamb, but a fierce dragon crossing the river. He had been running this hotel for quite some time. He served people according to their needs and occasionally used unskilled methods like badger jumping to extort tourists. It was a tried and tested method. He did not expect to fail miserably this time. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about." The boss pretended to be confused and shook his head. Slap. Half of the boss's face immediately swelled up. Seeing that Tang Zheng was about to slap him again, the boss was so scared that he shouted, I'll tell you everything. It's my fault this time. I shouldn't have hurt you. I'm a bastard." Tang Zheng hurriedly stopped his endless nonsense and asked straightforwardly, "Where did that group of people go?" The boss shrunk his neck and stuttered. Tang Zheng glared at him. The man was so scared that he spilled the beans. "They went west." "West?" Tang Zheng looked at the dark road ahead. There were many cars on it. Looking for the 3 cars in the dark was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Professor Qi was filled with regret and hatred. He looked into the distance, his lips twitching. Tang Zheng also frowned. Without a direction, this group of people would completely lose track of them. How would they find the ancient tomb then? Seeing that Tang Zheng was silent, the boss was afraid that he would vent his anger on him, so he reminded him, "So you're looking for those people. They're not easy to deal with." Tang Zheng moved his head and asked, "Do you know them?" "No, I don't." The boss hurriedly shook his head. "But they used to live here. I can tell they're not easy to deal with. Also, they have a smell on them." "Smell? What smell?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. The boss stuck out his tongue and said in surprise, "The smell of death." Tang Zheng was suddenly curious. He could see that the yin energy on those people was very strong, but he did not smell the smell of death. Seeing that Tang Zheng was very interested, the boss wanted to make up for his mistake and said, "People in that line of work all have that smell. Normal people can't smell it, but I've been here for so many years. I've met who knows how many groups of people like this. I've long known them." "Oh, what do you think they do?" "Excavators." The boss smiled slyly. Tombstone was also a tomb robber. This boss really had some experience. "Then do you know where they went? If you can tell me, then I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair." "Yes." The boss was convinced. "I'll tell you. They went to Qinling." "Qinling?" "Yes, there are many ancient tombs there. It's simply a paradise for these people. Who knows how many people go there every year. Moreover, many people have poured out treasures from there." Professor Qi's eyes lit up when he heard the 2 words Qinling. He slapped his head and said, "Why didn't we think that they went in that direction? It must be Qinling. Since they said there's a huge ancient tomb, then Qinling fits the description." Tang Jing knew little about this. Seeing that Professor Qi was so certain, he believed him. He asked the boss with a cold face, "Qinling is so big. Do you know where they went?" The boss said with a bitter face, "How would I know? If I had the ability, I'd be excavating too." "You still want to excavate?" Tang Jing was furious. The boss knew that things were not going well. He cried out in panic, I don't dare." He paused for a moment, then added, "But recently there have been a few groups of people going there. In the past there weren't so many people at this time. They must have found something. You'll definitely find some clues if you go there." Tang Zheng and Professor Qi looked at each other. Professor Qi nodded, apparently agreeing with this person's point of view. Seeing this, the boss looked at Tang Zheng expectantly. Tang Zheng threw him to the ground and fiercely said, "I'm warning you, if you dare to do this kind of thing in the future, yorin will be your end." As soon as he finished speaking, the boss saw a ray of light shoot up into the sky and land on top of the hotel. Then everything returned to normal. He saw the 2 people get into a car and drive away. The boss patted his chest with lingering fear and spat. He curled his lips and said, "You're scaring me? Do you think I'm scared? You're a dragon crossing the river, but there are always small shrimps. If I don't trick them, they'll have nothing to eat." The last word turned into a scream, but it was quickly drowned out by a loud rumbling sound. The scream came to an abrupt end. He stared with a pair of dead fish eyes at everything in front of him. His mind was blank and his whole body was trembling. It was as if there were countless swords hanging over his head. The hotel collapsed. It was a mess. The group of big men were crying and screaming as they struggled to climb out of the ruins. Since they had a destination, Tang Zheng and Professor Qi were not in a hurry. In order to save time, the two did not look for another hotel to stay. Instead, they drove straight to Qinling. Qinling was a huge mountain range that stretched from east to west in the middle of Wuxia. It was like a huge dragon lying on the earth of Wuxia. It was also known as the Dragon Vein of Wuxia civilization. Along the way, Professor Qi tirelessly filled Tang Zheng in on the knowledge of the Qinling Mountains. There had always been many ancient and great tombs in Qinling. However, due to the restrictions of the terrain, the mountains were too steep. There were also many unknown ancient tombs buried here. This caused the tomb robbers to run rampant. They even used gunpowder to open the mountains and blow up the tombs, destroying countless cultural relics. Professor Qi sighed and said hatefully, "If we catch all these tomb robbers, it will definitely be a great merit for the inheritance of Wuxia culture." Tang Zheng did not comment. This was a whimsical idea. Human nature sought benefits and avoided harm. If there was profit, there would definitely be people who lost their humanity and took risks. After more than a day of trekking, the undulating mountains gradually appeared in their sight. This mountain range was not as dangerous as Mount Hua, but it had another kind of charm. The undulating mountains were more shocking than the hundreds of thousands of mountains in southern Yunnan. Professor Qi got out of the car, put his hands on his waist and pointed at the mountains in the distance. He said, "Look, this is the Dragon Vein of Wuxia. It's so beautiful." "Professor Qi, is there any basis for the Dragon Vein?" Tang Zheng asked on a whim. This is a ruling method of the ancient kings. They deliberately increased the mystery of Qinling. How can there be dragons in this world? "Of course there is no dragon vein," Professor Qi said firmly. "Dragon." Tang Zheng immediately saw the flaw in Professor Qi's words. There were dragons in this world, so the dragon vein might not be a groundless rumor. What exactly was a dragon vein? Tang Zheng could not help but have this question in his mind. But in the end, no one could answer this question. Close to Qinling there were many more villages, hotels and restaurants. There were obviously more people. In recent years, the tourism industry had developed, and many explorers had come to conquer this mysterious mountain range. Tang Zheng and Professor Qi decided to find a place to stay for the night and recharge their energy, especially Professor Qi. After all, he was old. After such a long journey, although he was still very excited on the surface, it was difficult to hide the deep fatigue between his brows. Moreover, he could also use the rest time to inquire about the whereabouts of the grave robbers. The two chose a hotel that seemed to be more reliable to stay in. After eating at the restaurant next door, Tang Zheng left Professor Qi to rest in the room and walked out. However, this time, just in case, the two of them only booked a standard room. Tang Zheng could only endure Professor Qi's snoring for the time being. Strolling through the village, Tang Zheng saw that there were quite a few foreigners. The inns and restaurants were filled with quite a few foreigners. Some of them were clearly backpackers, while others made Tang Zheng frown. These people were more or less tainted with some mean energy. Although they were dressed as backpackers, how could they escape Tang Zheng's sharp eyes? He walked around the village vigilantly, but he did not find the group of grave robbers. However, he saw a few other groups of grave robbers. This was really a paradise for grave robbers, a disaster area for Wuxia civilization. After a night of silence, Tang Zheng endured Professor Qi's bombardment. Professor Qi once again regained his vigor and kept urging Tang Zheng to quickly enter the mountain. Since the group of grave robbers was not in the village, then they must be impatient to enter the mountain. If the grave robbers had arrived a step earlier, who knew how many cultural relics would have been destroyed? Chapter 726. The Qinling Mountains were not as steep as the Huashan Mountains, but they were continuous and lush. It was easy for people to lose their way. In this vast mountain, once one lost their way, it was not an exaggeration to say that they would eventually be trapped to death. The two of them had been on the road for half a day. The road under their feet changed from a main road to a winding path. In the end, there was no way to go. There were thorns and vines in front of them. If Professor Qi came alone, he would have been unable to move an inch. However, with Tang Zheng, everything became easier. The War Soul Sword was overkill. With one strike, the thorns and vines were defeated. The two of them easily shuttled through the vast mountain. They were much faster than the average person. Bang! Suddenly, A clear gunshot echoed in the mountain forest. It was particularly ear-piercing. Professor Chi shrunk his head and was shocked. He exclaimed in a low voice, "There are enemies." Tang Zheng looked up as if nothing had happened. In the distance, he saw a figure flashing in the dense forest. The gunshots did not stop. They came sporadically, making people nervous. Grave robbers? Professor Chi also looked around. He smacked his lips and asked, "Most likely. These people are really desperate. They even prepared guns." Tang Jing sighed. "Arrogant." Professor Chi scolded fiercely. "Let's go. Anyway, we haven't found any clues. Since we met grave robbers, let's follow the clues and see if we can find them." Tang Jing suggested. Professor Chi did not disagree. He said, "Later, you will make a move and teach these criminals a lesson." Tang Jing smiled and ignored Professor Chi's scholarly attitude. After a while, the two of them passed through the layers of obstacles and approached their destination. The gunshots had stopped. Tang Zheng and Professor Chi hid in the bushes. Not far from them was a group of fierce desperados. Many of them had guns in their hands. Some of them had machetes and other weapons. There were several corpses lying on the ground. The leader of the group, a scar-faced man, kicked the people on the ground, spat and cursed, "You bunch of shrimp soldiers and crab generals dare to touch that ancient tomb. You are courting death. I will send you to see the King of Hell first." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and swung the knife down, leaving a bloody wound on the other party's neck. That person twitched a few times before he died. Professor Chi was so scared that he exclaimed in a low voice. He knew that something was wrong and quickly covered his mouth. However, it was too late. The enemy had already found out. The scar-faced man shouted, "Who is it?" His subordinates had already taken action and arrived in front of the bushes with their guns pointed at the two of them. "Boss, we caught two people. Stand up and don't move. If you dare to move, I'll shoot you to death," the grave robber roared fiercely. Tang Jing cast a comforting look at the frightened Professor Chi. The two of them slowly stood up. The scar-faced man walked over and stared fiercely at the two of them. His small eyes rolled around, and the machete in his hand was pointed at the two of them. He asked, "Who are you?" Professor Chi wanted to speak, but he was interrupted by Tang Zheng. "We are tourists. We heard that the scenery in Qinling Mountain is beautiful, so we came to take a look." Tang Zheng had already carefully scanned this group of people. He did not find the grave robbers he was looking for. This meant that they were not in the same group. However, the ancient tomb that the scar-faced man had mentioned had aroused Tang Zheng's interest. Could it be that this group of grave robbers had also come for that ancient tomb? He was going to wait and see. He wanted to get some information from the other party. Seeing that Tang Zheng was dignified and neither servile nor overbearing, the scar-faced man laughed fiercely. "Boy, don't think that I am a fool. You want to fool us with such a clumsy lie? You are daydreaming." Tang Zheng did not care. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Oh, then what are you going to do?" "What am I going to do? You saw what we did just now. Of course I am going to send you to see the King of Hell," the scar-faced man said murderously. Tang Zheng was unmoved. He said, "I have seen the King of Hell a long time ago. I don't want to see him today." When he fought with the King of Hell in the Ghost Realm, he was no stranger to him. When the others heard this, they laughed sarcastically. "This boy is scared silly. Boss, just kill him. We still have business to do." Tang Jing turned a deaf ear to them and asked, "Where is the ancient tomb that you are talking about?" *CK, I am the one asking you. You dare to ask me? Damn, are you not afraid of death? Then I will fulfill your wish. The scar-faced man waved his machete. Tang Jing frowned. This group of people was not cooperating. It seemed that they were going to use force. Bang, bang, bang. However, a series of fierce gunshots interrupted his thoughts. The scar-faced man was shot between his eyebrows. Blood flowed out. His eyes were wide open as he fell to the ground with grievances. The others were beaten up by this sudden attack. However, in the end they could not escape the scythe of death. They fell to the ground one after another. On the contrary, Tang Zheng and Professor Chi stood in place unscathed. Tang Zheng's expression was calm. Professor Chi looked at so many dead people. He was already pale with fright. "Professor Chi, I am here. Don't be afraid." Tang Zheng comforted him softly. Professor Chi heard this and his trembling body slightly stopped. "Who is it this time?" Professor Chi asked with trepidation. "They will know when they come out," Tang Zheng said indifferently. In this kind of rain of bullets, it was not difficult for him to escape. However, he did not want to reveal his strength immediately. Moreover, this group of people who suddenly attacked were stronger. He wanted to see who they were. Rustling footsteps sounded in the woods. More than 10 people walked out. Tang Zheng's pupils suddenly shrank. He was secretly delighted. His target had appeared. He found the few grave robbers he had been following in the crowd. However, these people were obviously not the leader. One of them, an old man in his 50s with a goatee, caught Tang Zheng's attention. This was because he was too different from the others. Everyone else had a strong yin qi, but he was no different from an ordinary person. There was no yin qi around him at all. However, the occasional fierce light in his eyes still made Tang Zheng judge that this person was not an ordinary person. As the saying goes, a dog that bites does not bark. This old man was the dog that bites. He was much more powerful than the other people who looked fierce. This person seems to be the leader of the grave robbers. However, there is no yin qi on him. How can a person who has been drilling into graves for many years not be surrounded by yin qi? Could this old man have a way to resolve it? It was extremely unusual to be able to resolve the yin qi. Tang Zheng stopped underestimating him. The grave robbers surrounded them. More than 10 guns were aimed at the two of them. One of the grave robbers whispered a few words in the old man's ear. The old man looked surprised. His gaze went past Tang Zheng and circled around Professor Qi. Tang Zheng looked at him curiously. The person who whispered to the others in the inn was also the grave robber just now. Could it be that he had found some clues? The old man walked over and looked at Professor Qi with burning eyes. The famous Professor Qi Shaoan has graced us with your presence. What a surprise. Professor Qi let out a cry of surprise. The other party had actually seen through his identity. This was too unexpected. Tang Zheng suddenly understood. No wonder the grave robbers in the inn had escaped. It turned out that one of them had seen through Professor Qi's identity. Professor Qi was a titan in the archaeological world. It was not strange that the grave robbers could recognize him. Because of Professor Qi's prominent identity, the grave robbers must have thought that he was an official. They thought that the police had targeted them, so they ran away without stopping. Seeing Professor Qi so surprised, the old man looked around and shouted, "Police friends, you want to catch me, Wu Lao Air? Then please show yourself. How can you hide so sneakily?" There was no response from the dense forest. Wu Lao Air frowned and said, "Could it be that you are showing yourself because there is going to be blood? Professor Qi is a titan in the ancient examination world. If anything happens to him, you will not be able to bear the consequences." There was still no response. Professor Qi shouted, "What nonsense are you talking about? Where did the police come from?" Wu Lao Air stroked his goatee. His eyes flashed as he said, "So you are saying that you are acting alone?" "How am I acting alone? There are two of us," Professor Qi said angrily. Wu Lao Air glanced at Tang Zheng and said, "Is bringing a student that useful?" It was clear that he thought that Tang Zheng was an ordinary student. In fact, when Tang Zheng was quiet, he really had a scholarly aura. It was not surprising that Wu Lao Air misjudged him. Professor Qi said with a red face, "What's wrong with two people? Facing a group of grave robbers like you, 2 people are enough." Haha. The group of people laughed without restraint. They looked at Professor Qi as if they were looking at an idiot. Tang Zheng had been watching coldly from the side. This Wu Lao Air was not simple. He was waiting to catch this group of people in one fell swoop and then ask about the whereabouts of the ancient tomb. "Professor Qi, you have followed us all the way. You must have heard the news, right? You've come just in time. This time, even the heavens are helping me. Last time, I wasn't able to enter the center of the ancient tomb. This time, with you and our ample preparations, we will definitely succeed." Second Elder Wu changed the topic and said mysteriously, "What do you mean?" Professor Qi asked righteously. "Of course it's to pull you in. Professor Qi, with your knowledge, after the matter is done, I will give you 10% of the profits. How about it? This is much more money than doing research." Wu Lao Air said temptingly. Professor Qi flew into a rage. This was simply a humiliation to him. He did research to pass down Chinese culture. How was it for money? This group of people was tarnishing his character. He was about to scold them when Tang Zheng grabbed his hand and said, "Professor Qi, 10% of the profits is not a small amount. Aren't we lacking research funds? Won't this solve our problem?" As he said this, he secretly winked at Professor Qi. "Haha, your student is a smart person. A wise man submits to circumstances. In this society, who can't live with money?" Wu Lao Air said with praise. Professor Qi was not an idiot. After seeing this, he immediately understood that Tang Jing wanted to pretend to join them and then follow them into the ancient tomb. Professor Qi was not a pedantic person. Moreover, with Tang Jing accompanying him, he was not afraid. He took a deep breath and said as if he had no choice, "All right, but 10% is not enough. 20%. Chapter 727. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. The two opposing parties had become allies, but neither of them had good intentions. They were just using each other. With the addition of the tomb robbers, Tang Jing and Wu Qi moved faster. They were no longer running around like headless flies. Wu Lauer explained the current situation to the two of them. It was unknown whether he was being kind or not. In the circle of robbers, this ancient tomb was no longer a secret. Of course, ordinary thieves did not know about it, but those with a little power knew about it. Therefore, for the sake of the wealth, many powers gathered in the Qinling Mountains. In order to monopolize the wealth, the killing had already begun. A few weaker groups of tomb robbers had already been eliminated. The big fish ate the small fish and the small fish ate the shrimps. The law of the jungle played out incisively and vividly here. Wu Lao Er's group was relatively lucky. Last time, they only entered the periphery of the ancient tomb and found a few scattered spoils of war. However, from these spoils of war, they could already determine how much wealth the true core of the ancient tomb contained. Men died for wealth and birds died for food. This group of desperados did not hesitate to take risks for the sake of this treasure. As long as they succeeded, they could live a carefree life for the rest of their lives. After this deal, they would not have to worry about their lower body. Not many people could resist this kind of temptation. Professor Qi's eyebrows danced as he listened. If there was really such a huge ancient tomb, then the research value would be huge. Perhaps he could really get what he wanted and discover something shocking that could overturn history. Wu Lao Er was very excited. He said, "Professor Qi, you have been doing research for so many years, but you haven't done any robbers, right?" "Humph, we studied ancient tombs for work." "Unlike you," Professor Qi said disdainfully. "Isn't it the same now? Whether it's work or robbers, it's all for money. Money is the #1 driving force." Wu Lao Er laughed. Unknowingly, the group had already arrived in the depths of the Qinling Mountains. There were no signs of human habitation around. Occasionally, there would be wild beasts, but this group of people had guns and ammunition. Ordinary wild beasts could not do anything to them. Professor Qi looked around and asked curiously, "What is that ancient tomb like?" Wu Lao Er's expression became serious when he mentioned the ancient tomb. He said, "I've been robbing for most of my life, but I've never seen such an ancient tomb." "Oh, what is it like?" Professor Qi asked. Wu Lauer closed his eyes as if he was reminiscing. After a while he said, "I didn't see the whole picture of the ancient tomb. Just the tip of the iceberg shocked me. It was unheard of and unseen. It was a miracle in human history." After hearing this, Professor Qi and Tang Jing looked at each other with joy in their eyes. It was the right decision to come here. Professor Qi impatiently urged, "Can you describe it in detail?" Wu Lauer smiled bitterly. "I can't find the right words. Words can't describe or express it." Professor Qi and Tang Jing were more convinced when they saw that the other party was serious and did not seem to be lying. They looked forward to seeing the true appearance of the ancient tomb. "Was this tomb recently discovered?" Professor Qi asked. He knew that many ancient tombs had been discovered by grave robbers a long time ago. However, due to the conditions at that time, they couldn't enter the ancient tombs. They had to wait for the right time to enter the ancient tombs. Therefore, Professor Qi wanted to know the ins and outs of this ancient tomb. Of course, it's newly discovered. In fact, it's a coincidence. In the past, this area was trampled flat by our brothers. Many ancient tombs, big and small, were found, but no one has ever found such a large ancient tomb. Seeing Wu Lauer's excited expression, Professor Qi quickly asked, "How did you find it this time?" "Oh, someone accidentally found a treasure, so they opened this ancient tomb," Wu Lauer said mysteriously. "What treasure?" "I don't know the details. Anyway, when that group of people was fighting in Dianan, they accidentally found a natural phenomenon. A ray of light crossed the sky and then they followed it and found a treasure. This ancient tomb was drawn out by that treasure." Wu Lauer sighed. "Why didn't I have such good luck? If I had discovered this kind of secret, I definitely wouldn't have leaked the news. That group of people didn't have a tight mouth and leaked the news, so everyone naturally swarmed over. Everyone wanted to take a bite and share a piece of the pie." Professor Qi glanced at Tang Jing, The two of them had a strange look on their faces. The matter of southern Yunnan and the natural phenomenon caused them to have endless imagination. There were too many secrets and miracles hidden in southern Yunnan. Could it be that the treasure that the group of grave robbers found came from the 100,000 mountains? Tang Zheng had once heard from the heaven monk that back then in the 10,000 huge mountains, after he fainted, the 100 transformation Star Lord broke through the restrictions of the Buzhou mountain, and the restrictions of the prehistoric heavenly tomb also collapsed. Countless magic treasures and even living beings turned into rays of light that filled the sky and rushed in all directions, disappearing without a trace. Could it be? The treasure that the grave robber found was one of them? He felt more and more that this was a possibility. This group of grave robbers was really lucky. He just didn't know what the treasure was, but it actually led to this ancient tomb. Immediately, Tang Zheng became more and more expectant. Everything that was related to the 100,000 mountains was not simple. He had come here by chance, so of course he had to investigate it. After climbing over the mountains, they walked further and further away. Finally, they arrived at the foot of a towering mountain and stopped. Tang Zheng raised his head and looked around. This mountain peak was thousands of meters above sea level, and was obviously taller than the other mountains. Moreover, this was the eastern section of the Qinling Mountains, and if one looked from the mountain peak, they could overlook the vast North China plain. "Have we arrived?" Professor Qi asked. Second brother Wu nodded solemnly and ordered his subordinates to start preparing. They brought a lot of equipment, big and small bags, and Tang Zheng saw that there were explosives among them. Obviously, if they encountered any obstacles, they were prepared to explode violently. They were simply insane. After tidying up his equipment, second brother Wu gave the order and set off again. This time he clearly saw traces of people walking past. There were many broken thorny branches on both sides. Second brother Wu looked around and said coldly, "Someone beat us to it. What are you afraid of? The ancient tomb is so big and there are so many obstacles. It's useless even if you beat us to it." The others said indifferently. Second brother Wu nodded and did not forget to remind them, "There are so many dangers in there. Keep your eyes open. Be alert. Let's eat and drink well." The crowd was in high spirits and they rushed to the foot of the mountain. Looking at this group of greedy people, Tang Zheng's eyes flashed with a cold light. "You are happy now, but you will cry later." Although Tang Zheng was a newcomer in the archaeology field, after all, he was also a person who walked in the 100,000 mountains, a forbidden area for archaeologists and even tomb robbers. He knew that this kind of large ancient tomb seemed to be attractive, but in fact, it was full of dangers. If he was not careful, he would lose his life here. Professor Qi and Tang Zheng were escorted in the middle of the team. Wu Laosen took the lead and removed the disguise of a pile of thorny branches. A hole appeared in front of them. The hole was not big and it was only big enough for one person to pass through. It was like a crack formed by a crack in the mountain. It was so dark that they could not see where it led to. A gust of cold air floated out of the hole. Even if it was a hot summer day, it still made people feel a biting cold. "Go in, pay attention to the surrounding environment," second brother Wu ordered seriously. When Professor Qi walked past him, he grabbed his arm and warned him coldly, "Professor Qi, when you go in, you are only one step away from the King of Hell's palace. Don't play tricks, or you will really have to report to the King of Hell's palace." Professor Qi did not say anything. He shook off his hand and entered the hole with Tang Zheng. The tomb robber's wolf-eye flashlight illuminated the inside of the cave. There were no obvious traces of excavation on the mountain wall. Instead, it seemed to be torn apart by a huge force to form this cave. Torn apart. Tang Zheng felt a chill in his heart. How much power did this require? This was a whole mountain. How could it be torn apart? He could not figure out the reason for this at the moment. He just thought that he was thinking too much. Although the cave was cold, it was well ventilated. There was no difficulty in breathing. The surroundings were dead silent. Only the sound of messy footsteps could be heard. In such a claustrophobic environment, if one's nerves were not strong enough, they would be scared silly. Fortunately, this group of people were not ordinary people. Other than Tang Zheng, it was not the first time that the others entered the ancient tomb. They were familiar with it and moved forward carefully. The road ahead seemed to have no end. They did not know how long they had walked, but they still did not stop. Tang Zheng muttered in his heart, he had already walked for more than 1,000 meters, he should have already reached the middle of the mountain. The cave was winding upwards bit by bit, not towards the ground. Could it be that the ancient tomb was in the middle of the mountain? Suddenly, a ray of light in front of them attracted Tang Zheng. He quickly looked up and his vision gradually widened. "We're here." Someone in the crowd cheered in a low voice. Everyone was excited and quickened their pace. In the blink of an eye they had reached the end of the cave. However, there was a sudden scream in front of them. Then screams filled the cave. "Run! Run!" The person in front pushed back fiercely. This group of people was immediately pushed back. Some people were even trampled under their feet. There was no time to suddenly change direction. It would only cause a serious trample. Tang Zheng's eyes trembled. He quickly pulled Professor Qi and protected him behind him. He pushed his palm forward and pressed it against the back of the person in front of him, preventing him from retreating. "What are you doing? You're not allowed to retreat. Get the hell back." Wu Lauer brought up the rear and walked at the back of the group. When he saw the strange movement in front of him, he hurriedly scolded loudly. His voice finally made people relax slightly. However, panic still lingered in their hearts. They had been here the last time and did not encounter any danger. How could there be danger this time? What danger was it? A brother died. A loud shout came from the front. Chapter 728. Under second brother Wu's rage, the commotion in front finally calmed down a little. Suddenly there was a gust of wind above his head. Tang Zheng subconsciously looked up and saw that old Wu was actually climbing over everyone's heads with his two limbs. His speed was extremely fast. When second brother Wu climbed to the front was completely quiet. Only a few muffled bangs could be heard, and second brother Wu's voice was heard. "All of you come over here." Everyone rustled out of the cave and their eyes lit up. The few corpses on the ground were very eye-catching. They were all stabbed with arrows and blood flowed all over the ground. Everyone's expression was a little unsightly. Dying before the start of the expedition was not a good sign. "Damn it, we didn't see the mechanism last time we came. Why is there a mechanism this time?" Second brother Wu fiercely spat and cursed. Everyone else was silent. How could they know the reason? The people walking in front could not help but recall the scene they had just seen. One arrow after another shot out from the holes in the opposite wall. It was impossible for flesh and blood to block it. Tang Zheng also clicked his tongue in wonder. The ancient people's mechanism had been baptized for so long, but it could still be triggered. He also subconsciously looked at the opposite side. Suddenly, his mind was greatly shaken. His pupils were filled with a huge object. Immediately he was dumbfounded and his jaw almost fell to the ground. Professor Qi's reaction was even stronger than his. He directly screamed and rushed over without caring about his own safety. The others were attracted by the reactions of these two people. The crowd sneered, but they did not remember that their reactions were almost the same when they first saw this scene. Why was there such a big reaction? It was because they saw the true appearance of the ancient tomb. Looking up, the ancient tomb made of blue bricks could not be seen at a glance. It was as if it towered into the clouds. The top of the tomb could not be seen clearly. Moreover, as far as the eye could see, there was no end to it. This ancient tomb seemed to be boundless, as vast as the sea and as majestic as the mountains. How could there be such a strange ancient tomb in the mountains of Qinling? How did the people in the past build it? Question marks came one after another, drilling into Tang Zheng's mind one after another, making him unable to find an answer. Professor Qi was already lying on top of the ancient tomb. He wished he could grow 1,000 pairs of hands and touch every inch of the ancient tomb. The blue bricks seemed to make his heart beat faster than a woman's skin. The grave robber sneered at Professor Qi and said, "Professors are indeed stupid. It's not worth anything. What's there to touch? It's not like it's a woman." Second brother Wu's face was livid. He pulled Professor Qi aside and said, "What are you talking about? Hurry up and find a way to enter the tomb." In fact, this was only the periphery of the tomb. One had to break through the bricks to truly enter the tomb. Professor Qi slowly came back to his senses. His eyes became serious and dignified as he asked, "Where did you steal the bronze mask from?" "Bronze mask?" Wu Lauer was stunned for a moment before he sneered and said, "So it was because of this that you were lured all the way here from the capital." After pausing for a moment, second brother Wu pointed at the surrounding walls and said, "Look, it's the pit on the wall. Do you see it? The mask is embedded in it. I was almost scared to death at first glance." Tang Zheng and Professor Qi followed his finger and looked over. Sure enough, there were many pits on the surrounding walls. The size of the pits matched the bronze mask. Tang Zheng's face sank and asked, "There are so many pits. There must be a lot of bronze masks. Where are the others?" Second brother Wu spread out his hands and said, How would I know? They must have been sold. There were a lot of people who came in. Although they didn't enter the tomb, they looted all the good things here. What a sin. Professor Chi cried out loudly. He wanted to hit the ground with his head. The grave robbers' behavior was heartbreaking. If they didn't destroy the bronze masks, they would definitely be able to research a lot of new things. Tang Jing felt a little regretful. If there were so many masks, he could absorb more spiritual energy to increase his cultivation. Second brother Wu's face turned red and he said angrily, Professor Chi, don't blame me for being rude if you continue to be noisy. Professor Chi snorted and glared fiercely at Wu Lauer. It was as if he was looking at a mortal enemy. Second brother Wu pretended not to see and said, think of a way to enter the tomb. What about the tomb door? Professor Chi asked. Second brother Wu shook his head. It's useless. The tomb door is a 10,000-pound boulder. I've never seen such a huge boulder. It's impossible to push it open with human strength. Professor Chi curled his lips and said disdainfully, how did the ancients succeed? Humph, it's not that human strength can't do it. It's just that some people are too stupid. Second brother Wu was insulted and glared angrily. However, he forced himself not to flare up. He still had to rely on Professor Chi. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Sometimes, Professor Chi was stubborn to the point of being cute. Facing this group of fiendish grave robbers, he was like a warrior. Lead the way to the tomb door. Professor Chi said unquestionably. Second brother Wu was helpless and could only lead the two of them along the tomb for a long distance before finally arriving at the tomb door. The tomb door was about 10 meters tall and it was really a solid stone door. It was unknown how the ancient people built such a giant, but compared to this miraculous ancient tomb, this tomb door was nothing. Second brother Wu looked up at the tomb door and smacked his lips. We can't enter from here. We brought enough gunpowder so we can definitely blow open the tomb. Scram to the side. Professor Chi's temper flared up. He completely ignored the other party and began to fumble around the tomb door. Second brother Wu was about to explode. He gritted his teeth and said, Professor Chi, I'll give you 10 minutes. If you can't do anything whether you agree or not, I can only blow it up. Professor Chi snorted and didn't comment. He continued to work as he pleased. When Tang Jing saw this, he also went over and touched it. It was cold to the touch as if he was touching ice. This wasn't because of the special material of the bricks but because this place had accumulated too much yin qi over the years. Seeing Professor Chi so serious and persistent, Tang Jing didn't want to disturb him. Thus, Tang Jing began to study the tomb door again. He placed his hands on it and silently circulated his energy. Whoosh! He took a deep breath and released his true qi, but the tomb door didn't move. Tang Jing was secretly speechless. This really wasn't something that could be done by human strength. Time passed minute by minute. The tomb robbers were like ants on a hot pan. They walked in circles and looked at Professor Chi with burning eyes. Boom! Suddenly there was a loud sound. The huge echo reverberated in the enclosed space. It was deafening and almost made people fall to the ground. What's wrong? The tomb robbers shouted in panic. Professor Chi roared angrily, didn't I forbid you to use explosives? Second brother Wu said with grievance, it's not us. Well, Wu Lauer shook his head and said, we don't know how many people are still inside. His face became tense as he said this, we don't know how many people have already entered. We can't wait any longer. We have to blast open a hole and rush in. Otherwise, if we are too late, not even dregs will be left. The others agreed. They didn't pay attention to Professor Chi at all. They were busy preparing to set up the explosives. Professor Chi was so angry that his face turned red. He almost stomped his feet. A bunch of idiots, idiots. His lips kept trembling but his hands didn't stop moving. Suddenly his face turned cold. His hands stopped and he pushed the bricks one by one. It was as if he didn't have a pattern. He casually pushed a brick. After a while, his hands had pushed no less than 10 bricks. Tang Jing was slightly surprised. He didn't find any clues. Could it be that Professor Chi found something? Second brother Wu also stared at Professor Chi. He saw Professor Chi press the last brick. Click, click, click. The sound of gears turning clearly came from the ancient tomb. All the tomb robbers subconsciously stopped what they were doing. Second brother Wu's face was filled with ecstasy. He was so smart. It was so useful to bring Professor Chi along. He was much better than a tomb robber like himself. Professor Chi turned his head and glanced at the tomb robbers with disdain. What do you mean by human strength? What is this? As soon as he finished speaking, the huge tomb door actually rose bit by bit. This was definitely a slap in the face. The tomb robbers' faces turned red. They couldn't refute it at all. At this moment, Professor Qi was simply shining. He was the absolute focus of the crowd. Tang Jing took a deep breath. He couldn't help but silently praise Professor Qi. Even he couldn't find any clues, but Professor Qi found the pattern and easily broke through the tomb door. This required a huge amount of knowledge and enough intelligence to do it. He couldn't help but admire Professor Qi for this. The title of Professor Qi wasn't fishing for fame. He deserved it. The tomb door slowly rose. Everyone was so excited that they couldn't control themselves. They rubbed their fists and wanted to rush in. Second brother Wu hurriedly scolded, "Do you want to die? Have you forgotten the rules?" Everyone was silent. They remembered their companions who had died tragically. This wasn't an ordinary ancient tomb. It was an ancient tomb filled with danger. They hurriedly retreated. A gust of cold wind swept out from the tomb door, causing their teeth to chatter. Such a strong yin qi. Tang Jing was secretly speechless. This was more serious than he had expected. If a place had too much yin qi, it was definitely not a good thing. Back then, ordinary Balance's ominous land had too much yin qi and evil spirits frequently appeared. This was originally an ancient tomb. Would there be those dirty things? However, he was still bold. He thought to himself that even if there were those things, he could still deal with them. As for these grave robbers, humph, they had only themselves to blame for seeking their own deaths. He did not have the leisure to save them. After a while, second brother Wu said, "Let's go. Be careful. There must be a lot of F***king traps here. We have to be careful. Otherwise, no one will benefit." The few of them walked through the tomb door one after another. With a loud bang, the tomb door fell. There was no way out. Chapter 729. It was not dark in the ancient tomb because there were luminous pearls embedded in the ceiling, emitting a faint light. The eyes of the grave robbers lit up, and they kept swallowing their saliva. There were so many luminous pearls. How much would they be worth if they dug them all out? However, no one dug because it was too high. The ceiling was about 5 meters high, and there were smooth stone walls on both sides. They could not climb up at all, and they could only sigh. Useless things. How much is this worth? The big part is inside. Wu Lao slapped the head of one of his men and scolded him. The man was slapped into the wall, making a crisp sound. The person walking at the front suddenly let out a scream, and he disappeared because he stepped on air and fell into the darkness. "Watch your step," Wu Lao shouted. The crowd immediately jumped up and down because the stones under their feet were moving. Some stones disappeared into thin air and they were caught off guard. Tang Jing saw the stone under Professor Qi's feet disappear, and he quickly grabbed his hand. They jumped into the air and moved to another stone slab. However, that stone slab seemed to have lost its support and fell down. Tang Jing skimmed the surface and pulled Professor Qi through the stone slabs. However, the other grave robbers were not so lucky. After a while, more than half of them fell down. The others gathered around Wu Lao, and they all looked as if they had lost their parents. Wu Lao's face was ashen. He looked at Tang Jing and Professor Qi from afar with a surprised expression. Obviously, he also knew that he had misjudged them. However, the situation in front of him did not allow him to be distracted. He jumped up and down and his toes moved quickly. He narrowly avoided stepping on air. The other grave robbers did not have his skills. They screamed and fell into the darkness. There was no chance of survival. Bang! Wu Lao's feet landed firmly on the ground. He looked back and saw that the 10-meter distance he was standing on had completely collapsed, leaving only a dark space. It was like a bloody mouth that swallowed people. It made him shudder. It was too late for regrets. He should not have slapped his subordinate just now. The other party must have hit the mechanism on the wall, causing the entire team to be wiped out. His intestines were about to turn green with regret. He took a few deep breaths to suppress the unwillingness and anger in his heart, but when he looked up and saw Tang Jing's face, his anger surged again. "Brat, so you were pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger." Tang Jing smiled coldly and said, "Are you a tiger? You think too highly of yourself." Wu Lao clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles cracked. He wished he could go up and beat Tang Jing up. However, when he recalled Tang Jing's elegant movements just now, he knew that Tang Jing was much more powerful than him. He couldn't help but wonder if the other party's strength surpassed his. He didn't dare to cause any more trouble. This place was filled with danger. If he wasn't careful, he could be killed by the traps. It was better not to provoke the other party. Humph, good as expected, the younger generation will surpass us in time. Wu Lao threw down these words, flicked his sleeves and left, rushing forward with large strides. Professor Qi said worriedly, since you've already shed all pretense of cordiality, why don't you just directly capture him? Tang Jing smiled mysteriously and said, this place is so dangerous. It's good to let him take a trip. Moreover, he doesn't even have any explosives. How can he run out of here? Professor Qi suddenly understood and laughed. Tang Jing, why didn't I realize that you were so cunning before? Tang Jing said with a bitter face, didn't you teach me this? You can't be merciful to this kind of grave robber. Professor Qi nodded in agreement. Yes, you can't be merciful. I'll say something that shouldn't be said. It's better if all of these people die. Ah. Looking at his indignant appearance, Tang Jing couldn't help but laugh. The two followed Wu Lauer and the whole way was unobstructed. They didn't encounter any more traps. Obviously, both sides were very careful. They didn't act rashly and didn't trigger any traps. Suddenly, the sound of fighting in front of them attracted the three's attention. The three immediately stopped and looked up vigilantly. The road had already come to an end. In front of them was a huge space like a vast hall. Why would a hall be described as vast? Because looking from afar, it really was boundless. The three simultaneously sucked in a breath of cold air. This ancient tomb was getting stranger and stranger. The sound of fighting meant that someone had already entered. Perhaps it was the people who used the explosives just now. Moreover, it wasn't just a group of people. Gunshots rang out like firecrackers. When Professor Qi heard this, he beat his chest and shouted, "What a sin! Who knows how many cultural relics have been destroyed inside? This is a crime against history, a crime against the Wuxia civilization." Tang Jing hurriedly grabbed him, afraid that he would rush in. Even he wouldn't be able to catch the rain of bullets. Wu Lauer's expression kept changing. He stretched his neck to look inside, but he couldn't see clearly. In the end, his face was ashen. Obviously, the people inside were definitely more powerful than him. It wouldn't be easy for him to gain any benefits. The gunshots gradually stopped. The winner must have been decided. Suddenly, the few people couldn't sit still. The winner had been decided, so it was time to divide the spoils. If they still didn't go in, then they wouldn't have a share. Professor Qi couldn't bear to see the tomb robbers destroy the cultural relics. He kept urging Tang Jing. Tang Jing also felt that they couldn't delay and rushed into the hall with Wu Lauer. Tang Jing kept Professor Qi firmly behind him, afraid that a bullet would suddenly fly over. If anything happened to Professor Qi, then he would be guilty. After entering the hall, their field of vision suddenly opened up. Many people had already fallen on the ground. They were struggling on the verge of death, but they were mercilessly shot to death by the enemy. When they saw the three uninvited guests, the group of people turned their guns and pointed at them. They shouted, "Who are you? Hey, isn't this Wu Lauer? You're really lucky. You actually didn't die. Oh, you even brought two helpers. That's too shabby. One old and one young. You don't have anyone, right?" Some people in the crowd recognized Wu Lauer and began to ridicule him. Wu Lauer's face alternated between red and white. He said, "Chui-san, don't be so damn arrogant." "Shouldn't I be arrogant? Damn it, this ancient tomb was first discovered by me. If it wasn't for the news being leaked, how could you have a chance? But so what if you came? Everything here is still mine. Don't even think about fucking touching it." Chui-san unscrupulously roared. Wu Lauer curled his lips and disdainfully said, "Chui-san, you're too early to talk big. It's not like I don't know your ability. Your ability is not enough in front of me." "Is that so? Then look at those dead people on the ground. Who's more capable than you?" Chui-san proudly pointed at the corpses on the ground. Second brother Wu's pupils suddenly constricted, and his mind was greatly shaken because he saw a few familiar faces among them. These people were all famous figures in the plundering world, and their strength was several levels higher than his. How could these strong people be killed by Chui-san? This was not scientific, not normal. Wu Lauer's eyelids twitched and his expression changed greatly. Seeing this, Chui-san wantonly laughed. "Now you know how powerful I am? Wu Lauer, today is the day you die. Go to hell and watch your grandpa Chui-san live a good life for the rest of his life." Tang Jing and Professor Qi were not in the mood to listen to his bragging. Instead, they observed the hall. The hall was really big. They couldn't see the end of it at a glance. It was like a huge space. This space was far more vast than the mountain. This was too strange. Even Tang Jing couldn't help but frown. There must be a demon behind this abnormality. This demon was too big. Looking up at the sky, the two were simultaneously shocked. Above their heads was a void. They couldn't see the end of it, but there were specks of stars in the void. It really did look like a sky. But how could there be a sky in this ancient tomb? Professor Qi could no longer explain all of this with his knowledge. This was definitely a huge discovery in the archaeological world. It would definitely shock the world. Compared to this, the pyramids were not even worth mentioning. The ancestors of Wuxia were indeed endlessly creative and intelligent. Even modern people would find it difficult to achieve this. Professor Qi was secretly speechless. Tang Jing looked into the distance. He couldn't see the space clearly, but his intuition told him that there was something inside. Professor Qi, let's go over there, Tang Jing said. Professor Qi's eyes lit up. Just what I wanted. The two ignored Cui San'er and Wu Laoer's hostility. They were about to leave when they immediately attracted Cui San'er's attention. Stop. Cui San'er flew into a rage. He waved his hand and a group of subordinates blocked the two's path. Wu Laoer, your two subordinates don't know the rules. We haven't even finished talking and they want to run. Wu Laoer meaningfully said, Is that so? Then what are you going to do? What are we going to do? Of course we'll do the same as you. We'll send them to see the king of hell. Cui San'er said with killing intent. He waved his hand and a group of people surrounded them. It was clear that in the eyes of this group of desperados, they didn't care about the two of them. Tang Jing wrinkled his eyebrows. This group of people were not good people, so he decided to take care of this matter. His feet slipped and like a loach he slid through the crowd. Every time the others touched his body, they would be sent flying and fall to the ground, bleeding profusely. Although Wu Laoer already knew that Tang Jing's skills weren't ordinary, he didn't think that he would be this powerful. He was able to make a name for himself in this field mainly because of his master's small skills. The method to dissolve the yin qi was also a method that his ancestor had found with great difficulty. It wasn't that he was very powerful. Cui San'er was frightened by this scene. In the blink of an eye, he was the only one left standing. His face was ashen as he shouted, I'm going to kill you. He waved his hands in the air, and a scroll rose into the air and slowly unfurled. Gem? Tang Jing's eyebrows wrinkled as he stared fixedly at this scene. Chapter 730. The scroll slowly unfolded and a mysterious force rippled out. A ray of light shot up into the sky. With a point of Cui San'er's finger, the light fell on Tang Jing's body. Tang Jing's body tensed up and he turned pale with fright. A strong suction force was firmly attracting him. What's going on? He hurriedly looked at the scroll above his head. It had been completely unfolded. The vast mountains and rivers in the scroll were vivid and lifelike as if they were real. A whirlpool appeared in the center of the scroll, firmly attracting Tang Jing, trying to suck him in. I must not be sucked in. Although Tang Jing did not understand what the scroll was, he knew that being sucked in was not a good thing. He hurriedly circulated his qi, circulating it through his 8 extraordinary meridians to resist the suction force. Cui San'er was shocked to see that his tried and tested killing move did not have an immediate effect. A ruthless look flashed across his face as he said, Your third master wants to see how you can resist my mountain river map of the gods of earth and veil. As soon as his voice fell, the suction force suddenly increased. Tang Jing knew that something was wrong. He roared and pushed his palms above his head. Whoosh! A strong suction force also formed in his palms. Sky swallowing technique. 8 Since the mountain river map was a gravitational force, then he would use gravity against gravity. As expected, once the sky swallowing technique was used, the pressure suddenly decreased. War Spirit followed closely behind. With a slash of the sword, the turbulent airflow scattered in all directions. Cui San'er could not stand steadily and sat on the ground. Without Cui San'er's support, the mountain river map floated down. Tang Jing jumped and caught it. Don't touch my treasure, quickly return it to me. Seeing this, Cui San'er hysterically shouted and wanted to circulate his qi. However, how could Tang Jing give him the chance? A cold light flashed in his hand and War Spirit flew out, piercing through Cui San'er's chest. Oh my god! Wu Laoer, who had been sitting on the mountain and watching the tigers fight, was so scared that he ran away. This scene was completely beyond his understanding, and his heart was instantly filled with fear. Tang Jing glanced at Wu Laoer, who had already rushed into the darkness ahead. He didn't immediately chase after him. Instead, he carefully observed the scroll in his hand. The scroll was about half a meter long and various mountains and rivers were drawn on it. Moreover, most of them were not mountains and rivers in Wuxia's reality, which made Tang Jing quite surprised. There was a mysterious fluctuation of spiritual energy on the painting. Could it be that the treasure Chui Center obtained from the Grand Myriad Mountains was this stately painting? Did he find this ancient tomb just by relying on this map? Professor Qi also came over and stared straight at the painting. His eyes lit up as he looked at the bright stars in the sky. I've never seen such a magical painting. Look at the river, the water is actually flowing. And that forest, the branches and leaves are swaying as if they're being blown by the wind. Professor Qi was already dumbfounded as he cried out in surprise. Tang Jing fixed his eyes on it. Sure enough, he didn't notice this clue just now. Every blade of grass and every tree in the stately painting seemed to have vitality. This kind of thing had never been seen or heard of before. This is a miracle. Professor Qi smacked his lips and his jaw almost fell to the ground. Professor Qi couldn't help but rub the painting, but there was nothing. The attraction just now had already disappeared without a trace. Tang Jing, can you see the secret inside? Tang Jing shook his head. He was experienced and knowledgeable, but he had never seen such a magical painting. Professor Qi, let's go back and study it carefully. Let's catch up first. There must be more things over there, Tang Jing reminded. Professor Qi's eyes lit up, and he nodded in agreement. Yes, that Wu Lauer has already escaped. We must catch up to prevent him from destroying more cultural relics. Tang Jing casually threw the stately painting into the sumaru bag. Suddenly he exclaimed. The stately painting didn't react at all. What's the matter? Why can't it be put into the sumaru bag? Tang Jing had never encountered such a situation before. Even a colossal figure like the venerable ideologist could be put into the sumaru bag, but this small painting couldn't be put in. This was too strange. After hearing Tang Jing's explanation, Professor Qi was also dumbfounded. He shook his head and said, "This is a matter for you cultivators. I really don't know the reason." Since it couldn't be put in the bag, Tang Jing simply took out a backpack and carried it close to his body. Then he set off with Professor Qi. The stars above their heads shone, but the light was very dim. The two of them were prepared and took out their flashlights. Under their feet was a flat road paved with green bricks. It was like a huge square. As far as the flashlight's light could reach, it was still an empty square. It was barren and there was nothing in it. It couldn't illuminate the sides at all. How big is this place? Professor Qi couldn't help but exclaim. Tang Jing said solemnly, there are too many strange things in this ancient tomb. Professor Qi was incomparably excited. Strange things mean that it's magical. That's why there are so many new discoveries. After walking for a long time, they still didn't see Wu Lauer's figure. Just as the two of them were about to lose hope, a huge phantom vaguely appeared in the distance. This phantom was tall and large and its outline was very frightening. However, it was too far away to see clearly. Tang Jing was overjoyed. They finally found the building. With a target, the two of them were energized and quickly ran toward the target. Finally, everything in front of them became clear. The colossal figure also revealed its true appearance. The two of them were startled and subconsciously stopped in their tracks. The two of them looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with shock. This was actually a huge altar. How big was it? It was as big as 10 main courts. Painting. The two of them immediately remembered the painting that the grave robber sold to Old Wei. There was such an altar in it. Moreover, it looked like it was the same one. Could that painting be describing the scene in front of them? The two of them quickly remembered another scene in the painting. A group of people were building a magnificent palace. In front of the altar, there was a dense crowd wearing bronze masks. The two of them immediately raised their flashlights and shone it over. The altar was too big. They couldn't see clearly what was behind the altar. They couldn't see if there was a crowd of bronze masks behind the altar. That painting must be a documentary of the construction of this ancient tomb. It was just stolen by the grave robbers. Professor Qi concluded. Tang Jing nodded. His thoughts were similar to Professor Qi's. Doesn't that mean there's a palace behind it? Tang Jing pointed at the back of the altar and said. Professor Qi muttered, it's possible. Tang Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. The painting clearly depicted the appearance of the palace, which towered into the clouds as if it was on par with the heavens. How magnificent it must be. Tang Jing, take me to the altar. Professor Qi's eyes lit up with excitement. He looked up and stared at the altar. Go up? Yes, this is the place where the ancients worshipped. There are many secrets that can be found in this kind of place. We can't miss it. We have to see it first. Moreover, there were so many traps at the entrance of this ancient tomb. However, it was safe and there was no danger. This is very unusual. Therefore, we can't take the risk. We have to figure out the situation first. Professor Qi said seriously. Seeing that he was so cautious, Tang Jing thought for a while and agreed. Then hold on tight. Tang Jing lifted Professor Qi's shoulder, and with a tap of his toes, he flew up to the top of the altar. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Professor Qi heard the sound of the wind. He looked up subconsciously and found that they were getting higher and higher. His heart beat faster. He took a deep breath and drove away his fear. He looked up excitedly. The top of the altar was close at hand. Bang! Tang Jing's feet landed on the ground. The dull sound of his footsteps was very obvious in the empty space. It gave the two people a fright. Tang Jing put down Professor Qi and took a deep breath. He looked up and realized more clearly that the altar was extraordinary. What shocked him even more was that the altar seemed to be a hole. It was made of a huge stone. With Tang Jing's knowledge, he had never heard of such a huge and complete stone in the world. He took a deep breath and circulated his genuine qi to guard against the unexpected. Professor Qi was already squatting on the ground and studying it. There were many complicated patterns on the ground. They were not very beautiful. They were very thick and curved, giving people a strange feeling. Tang Jing had seen the square of the witch tribe in the 100,000 mountains. That square contained divine power. Not only did it have the 4 symbols venerables, but it also had the heaven and earth mystic stone. This altar was probably as magical as the mystic stone. He did not dare to be careless. Professor Qi lowered his eyebrows and did not say anything. His thick eyebrows were deeply furrowed. He followed the patterns on the altar and ran forward. After a while he stopped and continued to run. Tang Jing looked at him suspiciously and did not leave his side. He did not know what he had discovered. Suddenly, Tang Jing stopped and grabbed Professor Qi, who wanted to rush forward again. Professor Qi was caught and shouted in dissatisfaction. Tang Jing, what are you doing? Let go of me. Tang Jing pulled Professor Qi behind him and cautiously said, Professor Qi, don't be impatient. Hearing this, Professor Qi finally calmed down and asked, What's wrong? There's someone. Tang Jing said. Someone? Professor Qi was shocked. How could there be other people in this place? Could it be Old Wu? Over Tang Jing's shoulder, Professor Qi finally saw that person. It was definitely not Old Wu. Although it was only a back view, it gave people a completely different feeling. Who is it? Professor Qi swallowed his saliva and asked. Tang Jing shook his head and said, Let's go up and take a look. Since he had met someone, he couldn't just turn a blind eye. The two of them walked towards the opposite side. That person kept looking into the distance like a piece of wood, not reacting at all. But when the two of them were still more than 10 steps away, that person moved. He suddenly turned around and his eyes were as sharp as a peerless treasure sword, almost blinding people. He was very particular about his clothes and his outfit was exquisite. His clothes were tailored very well, and even his nails were cut very neatly, just like a woman. But he was a man, a very exquisite man. If a man used the word exquisite, then he must be extraordinary. Chapter 731. Tang Jing stared at this person, and the other party looked at him with interest. Obviously, this person was not an ancient person but a modern person. His modern outfit was even more fashionable than Tang Jing's. Who are you? Tang Jing asked cautiously. This person was definitely not an ordinary grave robber. Those grave robbers were not even worthy of carrying his shoes. Even Tang Jing did not dare to underestimate the aura that was faintly emitted. Tang Jing. The other party did not answer but instead called out Tang Jing's name. Tang Jing and Professor Qi were both shocked. Tang Jing was sure that he had never seen this person before. The other party left a deep impression on him. Even if he had only seen him once, he would never forget. You know me? The other party laughed and his smile was even a bit evil. Of course I know you. Your great name is like thunder to my ears. We have never met. Yes, but I have seen your picture. The other party said bluntly. I really did not expect to see you here. Allow me to introduce myself first, otherwise it would be rude. The other party was polite, like a noble gentleman. This humble one is Jade-Faced Flying Dragon. His voice was raised a few notches, and his head was raised high as he said proudly. Jade-faced flying dragon? Tang Jing frowned. He had never heard of this person in the Jianghu. Where did this expert come from? I think you have never heard of me, but you will remember my name in the future. Jade-faced flying dragon said confidently. What? Because I want to kill you. Jade-faced flying dragon deliberately dragged out the word kill, and a murderous aura seemed to burst out from this word. Tang Zheng's body tensed up. The other party had said that he wanted to kill him. There were only two possibilities. First, he was an idiot and only then would he be so arrogant. Second, he was a true expert and had this confidence. Obviously, the other party did not belong to the first category. Then, he was definitely an expert and an extraordinary one at that. He was an expert that Tang Zheng could not see through. The other party was only in his 30s, yet he had this kind of cultivation. He was definitely an outstanding person. Why was there no news of such a fierce person in the Jianghu? Seeing that Tang Jing didn't move, fair-faced flying dragon smiled. Very good. You can still stand here after hearing that I want to kill you. In the past, when others heard this, they would immediately run away. Is that useful? Tang Jing asked. Fair-faced flying dragon praised. You are very smart. You know that running away is futile. It only adds to the fun of the game. It doesn't have much of an effect because they all died in the end. Tang Jing's eyelids twitched as he sneered. Is that so? I'm not like those people. Are you so confident that you can kill me? Of course. Fair-faced flying dragon said without hesitation. I never thought that I would meet you here. This can be considered fate. Before I kill you, I'll let you take a look at the Heavenly Palace. Heavenly Palace? Tang Jing and Professor Qi cried out in surprise. Oh, it seems that you don't understand the purpose of this trip, nor do you understand the truth of this ancient tomb. Fair-faced flying dragon raised an eyebrow and said with a smile that was not a smile. Could it be that you understand? I know a thing or two. Fair-faced flying dragon elegantly turned around and pointed into the distance, completely unafraid of Tang Zheng's sneak attack. Of course, Tang Zheng would not sneak attack. He and Professor Qi strode forward and looked up. Immediately, the two's attention was firmly attracted. In the distance, there was a huge palace that towered into the sky. Wasn't this the palace in the painting? Didn't so many people work so hard to build this palace? The altar and the palace were exactly the same as in the painting. The two's breaths involuntarily quickened. Fair-faced flying dragon glanced at the two and said with a smile, the wisdom of the ancients is truly endless. It's unimaginable and unattainable for us descendants. This is the heavenly palace you were talking about? Professor Qi asked with a trembling voice. He was not afraid but excited. There had never been a record or description of this building in the history of Wuxia. This meant that this discovery was unprecedented. What did this mean for him? Money? Fame? No. He did not care about any of these. He could complete the history of Wuxia and even fill in the gaps in Wuxia's history. This was what tickled his nerves the most. Fair-faced flying dragon nodded. Yes, this is the heavenly palace. It's magnificent and beautiful. Back then, Emperor Qin was truly an emperor, a peerless hero. Not only did he build the terracotta army, he also built a heavenly palace that ordinary people do not even know about. You're saying that Emperor Qin built this? Professor Qi's breaths quickened as if he was about to have a heart attack. Of course. Don't tell me that you don't know who the owner of the tomb is after entering it? Fair-faced flying dragon asked curiously. Tang Zheng and Professor Qi's cheeks turned red. They really did not know. That's true. This ancient tomb didn't even exist in historical records. How could a normal person know about it? Who knows what kind of luck those tomb raiders had, but they somehow stumbled upon this ancient tomb and allowed it to see the light of day again. Fair-faced flying dragon sighed. Tang Zheng looked at the magnificent palace as if he was looking at a mountain. This was the work of Emperor Qin. No wonder it was so shocking. This emperor was truly not someone that ordinary people could hope to reach. It was even possible to imagine. His thinking was far beyond the limits of a human. As a celestial as well, Tang Zheng could not help but feel ashamed of his inferiority. He was too inferior as a celestial. Let alone a godlike figure like Qiyu, even Qin Shi Huang was someone he could not compare to. He was usually proud of his achievements, but now he realized that his achievements were simply insignificant compared to this identity. It was even a bit laughable. He could not smile at all. There was a bitter taste in his mouth. However, he also felt that it was very strange. He had just learned of Emperor Qin's identity from the five-clawed golden dragon, and now he had accidentally stumbled into his tomb. Was this the will of the heavens? The shock in Professor Qi's heart far exceeded Tang Zheng's. There were many records of this ancient emperor in history, but many of them were vague and even mysterious. It was a secret that many historians could not find out even if they scratched their heads. Back then, the appearance of the terracotta warriors had shocked the world of archaeology, the world of history, and the world. No one would have thought that it was just the tip of the iceberg. What was even more shocking was that this was a project that could not be completed by human strength. Professor Qi remembered another mystery in the world of archaeology. That was Emperor Qin's tomb. There were many different opinions, but no one had a definite conclusion. He would never have thought that his tomb would be built in the vast Qinling Mountains, hidden deep in the heart of the mountains. No wonder no one had found it after such a long time. He could not help but think of some of the famous emperors in history. In order to prevent their tombs from being raided after their death, they had used all kinds of methods and set up all kinds of traps. But compared to Emperor Qin's tomb, it was simply child's play. Professor Qi pointed at the heavenly palace and asked, "Is Emperor Qin's coffin in the heavenly palace?" Fair-faced flying dragon nodded and said, "Yes." Professor Qi was overjoyed. He grabbed Tang Zheng's hand and said, "We must go to the heavenly palace, we must." Tang Zheng nodded. He also wanted to see this celestial from thousands of years ago. He wanted to see if he could learn more about the secrets of celestials. Fair-faced flying dragon interrupted Professor Qi's beautiful dream, only to hear him say coldly, "I'm afraid you don't have this life. However, to be buried here with Qin Shi Huang, to be disguised as an emperor for all eternity, this is a great honor." Tang Zheng stepped forward to protect Professor Qi and said, "You really can't wait to kill me? The longer we delay, the sooner we kill you, the better. In this world there are too many idiots who don't make a move, and in the end they will miss the opportunity. I, fair-faced flying dragon, am not that stupid." Tang Zheng's pupils shrank. Professor Qi was indeed a difficult person to deal with. "Professor Qi, when we fight later, if I can't defeat him, I will find an opportunity to put you down. Then you can't turn back. Immediately run back the way you came and then leave this tomb. Remember, don't look back." Tang Zheng whispered. Professor Qi's face changed drastically. He looked at the heavenly palace and said reluctantly, "Leave this place? Yes, your life is more important than anything else. Where there is life there is hope." Tang Zheng tried his best to persuade him. He was afraid that Professor Qi would lose his temper. Professor Qi hesitated for a moment and then sighed. "Okay." Tang Zheng walked forward in large strides. When he was a few meters away from Fair-faced Flying Dragon, he looked at him with shining eyes. Fair-faced Flying Dragon smiled and said, "Pay attention, my attack has begun." Tang Zheng had already paid 120% attention. Hearing these words, War Soul was already firmly grasped in his hand. The sporadic mottled light was unable to cover up the destructive light of War Soul. On the altar there were only a few flashlights on the ground. They were not very bright, but for these two experts, it was enough to determine victory and defeat. It was enough to decide life and death. Although he had already paid enough attention, the moment Fair-faced Flying Dragon's voice fell, Tang Zheng felt a despicable aura shoot towards him. He had not seen clearly what it was. He quickly raised War Soul. Ding! With a crisp sound, War Soul trembled non-stop. Tang Zheng's feet slipped and he almost fell back. War Soul buzzed non-stop and Tang Zheng's arm went numb. It was just a single strike. Moreover, he had not seen clearly how powerful it was. This caused him to be extremely frightened. He quickly looked up and saw Fair-faced Flying Dragon's finger in the air. That despicable aura shot towards him again. Tang Zheng did not sit still and wait for death. He leapt into the air and swoosh swoosh swoosh. War Soul slashed through the air. A cold light blossomed on War Soul's blade, creating dazzling sparks. Tang Zheng finally saw clearly that his opponent's weapon was a throwing knife. Chapter 732. Fair-faced Flying Dragon saw that his flying dagger missed, but his expression did not change. He said, "Not bad," as he quickly waved his arm. Swoosh, 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 a series of cold lights swept through the dark space. Tang Zheng felt a flash in front of his eyes, and the flying dagger was already flying towards him like a string of pearls, full of killing intent. Ding ding ding. The flying immortals from Outer Heaven sword technique was displayed to the fullest. The sword light that filled the sky was like 1,000 zhang, illuminating the entire space. The two were secretly shocked in their hearts. Fair-faced flying dragon said in his heart that he was even more powerful than the legends made him out to be. Tang Jing, on the other hand, had a strange expression. Just where did this fair-faced flying dragon come from? He was definitely an expert of the great scholar realm. Moreover, he did not seem like a first or second stage great scholar like Long Shenyuan. He was unable to determine this person's specific cultivation, but he was definitely a true expert. Tang Jing had just experienced the battle between the State Master and Yamato Noroki not long ago, so he was not unfamiliar with this level of battle. In fact, he was getting more and more used to it. The battle between the two became more and more intense. There were traces of the war spirit sword and the flying dagger on the altar. The dagger was like a chisel, severely damaging the altar. Seeing this, Professor Chi even had the heart to die. Tears were about to drip out as he shouted, "Destroyed, destroyed." Pound, the complicated patterns on the ground could definitely be studied to find many useful things, but it was destroyed just like that. As a scholar, one could imagine how painful it was. It was even more painful than killing him. However, the battle did not change according to his will. The two of them were bound to determine victory or defeat or even life and death. Although Tang Jing was only at the 9th stage of fasting, and was still a step away from the Golden Core realm, his cultivation was lower than fair-faced flying dragons. However, he had the help of a divine weapon and was not at a disadvantage for a while. The sound of the battle was not small, and it was especially clear in this empty and deathly silent space. Suddenly, both of their ears twitched, and they subconsciously looked in a direction. They could not see anything in the darkness, but there was obviously something. As if to verify their guess, the sound became louder and louder. Bang, bang, bang. It was like a heavy object hitting the ground. It was like the sound of a drum heavily pounding on people's hearts, causing their heartstrings to tremble. Even so, the two of them did not give up on the battle. Instead, the battle became more and more intense, and danger surrounded them. Professor Chi also heard the sound and stretched his neck to look outside the altar. Suddenly, his pupils dilated rapidly and his mouth opened wide. It was as if someone had grabbed his throat and he couldn't even let out a scream. When the two saw his reaction, they rushed to the edge of the altar at the same time and looked down. *CK. Both of them cursed in their hearts at the same time as their scalps went numb. Countless people were standing on the ground below, all of them looking up at the altar. Bronze mask. Tang Jing raised his head and exclaimed. Everyone was wearing the same bronze mask as the one in the painting, but there were too many bronze masks. Although Tang Jing really wanted the bronze masks, this many still made his scalp go numb. Moreover, the empty eyes behind the bronze masks showed that these were definitely not living people. Not a living person. That was a dead person. In fact, they weren't even dead people. Tang Jing had even been to the world of spirits and souls. Of course, he knew that there were many things in this world that he had never heard of or even thought of. Obviously, these people weren't good people. When they saw the three people on the altar, they sped up. Like monkeys, they climbed up the pillars of the altar and climbed up the altar at lightning speed. Tang Jing and fair-faced flying dragon looked at each other at the same time and subconsciously stopped fighting. Fair-faced flying dragon muttered to himself, "My attention was all attracted by the heavenly palace just now. I really didn't see so many things hidden below." Professor Chi's face was bitter as he sighed, "I'm afraid that you guys destroyed their altar, so they're coming to kill us." Altar? The two of them looked down subconsciously. Indeed, the altar was full of holes and scars. The two of them exclaimed at the same time and stared straight at the altar. It turned out that there was a faint light flowing in the altar, as if something had been triggered. Looks like it's true. Tang Jing sighed softly. Altars were very mysterious in ancient times, and the altar here was even more so. The two of them almost destroyed the altar. Of course, they must have triggered some mechanism to attract the group of bronze masks. They're coming up. Professor Chi had been lying on the edge of the altar and yelled at the top of his lungs. The two of them tensed up. Fair-faced flying dragon looked deeply at Tang Jing and said, "Looks like we can't kill you today. Stay alive. The next time we meet, you won't be so lucky." Fair-faced flying dragon leaped down from the altar as soon as he finished speaking. "Ah!" Professor Chi screamed. He didn't expect fair-faced flying dragon to walk right into his trap. Tang Jing's face tensed up, but he didn't think so. Sure enough, the fair-faced flying dragon spread its wings like a rock and landed on the ground. The tip of its foot landed heavily on one of the bronze masks. With a loud bang, the bronze mask shattered into pieces and scattered all over the ground. Then he did the same. Like a bird flying across the water, he flew above the bronze mask. Every time he landed, a bronze mask would be destroyed. Bang! Suddenly, a loud sound interrupted Tang Zheng's observation. He saw a bronze mask jump up the altar and crazily pounce at the two of them. They were wearing armor and looked like warriors. They were full of killing intent and gloomy. Tang Zheng's eyes were filled with killing intent. With a kacha sound, War Soul cut the opponent in half and scattered on the ground, turning into pieces. But before he could catch his breath, the sound of falling bodies came one after another. In the blink of an eye, the altar was densely packed with bronze masks. Their empty eyes and densine chi struck the heart. If it was a coward, they would have collapsed. Fortunately, Professor Chi had been in the field of archaeology for decades and had seen many strange things. Although he was afraid, he didn't completely lose his wolf. His attention was attracted by something else: the pieces scattered on the ground. Professor Chi picked up a piece and smelled it. He then carefully broke it and examined it carefully. Suddenly his face changed. He shouted at Tang Zheng's back, "Tang Zheng, they are terracotta warriors." Terracotta warriors. Tang Zheng's first thought was the terracotta soldiers and horses. Their craftsmanship was as good as the heavens, shocking the hearts of people. But compared to the ones in front of him, those were too mediocre. At least, those terracotta warriors were dead and couldn't move on their own. These were living terracotta warriors and they were quite lethal. Professor Chi couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. He praised, "It's too miraculous. Qin Shi Huang is indeed a great emperor. He actually created so many living terracotta figures. This is no longer something that can be done by humans. A miracle." Yes, in Professor Chi's mind, this was a miracle. It was not something that could be done by humans. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, saw some clues. These terracotta warriors were nourished by yin qi, accumulated over time, and experienced thousands of years to create such a spectacle. Just now, when he had just stepped onto the altar, he had already noticed that the yin qi on the altar was denser than in other places. It was as if it was water filling the air. Obviously, other than offering sacrifices, this altar might also be used to collect the yin qi in the ancient tomb to nourish these terracotta warriors. In fact, along the way Tang Zheng had been puzzled. This place was filled with yin qi, so how could there not be any yin soldiers or evil gong filthy things? Now the answer was revealed. It turned out that the yin qi was all used to nourish these terracotta warriors. There was no extra to nurture those things. These terracotta warriors were not weaker than those things. More and more terracotta warriors climbed onto the altar like a flood. They were densely packed, numbering in the thousands. They had already completely occupied the altar. Tang Zheng took out the heaven-shocking bow and the sun-shooting arrow. There were too many enemies and the War Soul sword might not be able to kill his way out. "Tang Zheng, what should we do?" Professor Chi asked fearfully. "Hide behind me and follow me to kill our way out." Tang Zheng said resolutely, as if he was alone, it would not be difficult to escape. But with Professor Chi by his side, all of this would be wishful thinking. Professor Chi mustered up all the courage in his body, preventing his legs from going soft from fear. He followed closely behind Tang Zheng. The terracotta warriors had already rushed over like a tidal wave. Their killing intent and yin qi covered the sky and earth, reaching a peak. "Kill!" Tang Zheng roared. The sun-shooting arrow left the bowstring. The surging qi instantly tore apart the few terracotta warriors at the front, and the terracotta warriors at the back followed closely behind, rushing over. Bang bang bang. The terracotta warriors continued to explode, filling the sky with fragments. Suddenly, a horse's neigh sounded out in this empty space. A war horse made of terracotta warriors soared into the air and flew up from below, its four hooves landing heavily on the altar. On the back of the horse sat a terracotta warrior. His attire was completely different from the other terracotta warriors, and he looked like a general. With a stretch of his hand, he grabbed the sun-shooting arrow that was flying towards him. The sun-shooting arrow was already at the end of its flight and did not have much power left. But even so, it could be seen that the other party was definitely not someone the other terracotta warriors could compare to. Tang Zheng's face changed slightly. One less sun-shooting arrow would be a huge loss, and he would definitely not allow this to happen. Thus, he leaped up, pulled Professor Chi and flew over the densely packed terracotta warriors' heads, and rushed straight towards the general. A cold light flashed in the general's eyes. He placed the sun-shooting arrow on the war horse, and a long spear appeared in his hand. With a shake of the spear, he pierced towards Tang Zheng with the force of 1,000 kilograms. Tang Zheng was in the air, and beside him was a Professor Chi. His strength was greatly reduced, but he still reacted accordingly. He kept the heaven-shocking bow and used the War Soul sword instead. Clang. A muffled explosion sounded out, like a bolt from the blue, causing the surrounding terracotta warriors to sway. Chapter 733. Amidst the army of 10,000, the overwhelming killing intent in Yin Chi swept over like a tornado. The two of them were like small boats drifting in the wind, ready to fall apart at any moment. Kill? Tang Jing roared. He was not one to go with the flow. He immediately summoned the four manifestations venerable. Its massive body immediately made the other terracotta figures look like ants. The four manifestations venerable had been heavily injured. Tang Jing had yet to find a way to repair it, but it was still capable of basic physical defense and attack. With a leap, Tang Jing pulled Professor Qi and drilled into the body of the four divine beasts, seizing the attacks that covered the sky and earth. The four divine beasts' body immediately rang out with ping 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 sounds. This was the first time Professor Qi had entered the four manifestations venerable. He was like Granny Lu entering the Grandview Garden. He wanted nothing more than to double his eyes and greedily observe his surroundings. Back then, he had personally witnessed the four manifestations venerable's strength in the 100,000 mountains. However, that was only a passing encounter. Moreover, that was outside and he was unable to enter the interior. Now that he had gotten what he wanted, he was like a child who had obtained his favorite toy. The corners of his mouth cracked open and he could not stop smiling foolishly. However, Tang Jing was not as optimistic. His expression was extremely grim as he controlled the four manifestations venerable to charge towards the edge of the altar. How could the terracotta figures let him do as he pleased? The general swung his spear and the other terracotta figures let out soundless roars. Like maggots attached to the bones, they quickly climbed up the four manifestations venerable in an attempt to attack its vital points. Go to hell! Tang Jing angrily roared, and the four symbols venerable immediately waved his arms, sweeping away the terracotta figures that were climbing up his body. Ding ding dang dang, like rain hitting banana leaves, these terracotta figures fell to the ground one after another, shattering into pieces. However, it was still no match for the sheer number of terracotta figures. Before long, the terracotta figures had climbed all over the four manifestations venerable's body. They exerted force on its chest and head. Banging sounds rang out incessantly. The four manifestations venerable's strength had already been greatly reduced. Faced with such an attack, even Tang Jing felt like his heart had been struck by a heavy punch. His face paled. However, he did not give up. He swept the terracotta figures off his chest, then with a tap of his foot, he shot towards the edge of the altar like an arrow. He had succeeded. The four symbols venerable leaped into the air and rapidly descended to the ground. Roar! All of a sudden, a low roar exploded above their heads as the general galloped out of the altar. Bang! With a muffled thud, the warhorse actually landed on top of the four symbols venerable. Clang! The spear struck the top of the four symbols venerable's head. The tremendous force caused the four symbols venerable to fall even faster. Boom! After an earth-shattering boom, the four symbols venerable landed on the ground. Cracks spread out in all directions, and the terracotta figures on his body lost their balance and fell to the ground one after another. They were thrown off their feet and shattered into pieces. The four symbols knight wanted to run, but the general above him had accumulated another attack. The cold light of the spear flashed, and it looked like it was about to hit the four symbols knight again. Tang Jing was well aware of the situation of the four divine beasts. If it had been in the past, it would have been invulnerable, but now it had been severely injured, and its strength had been greatly reduced. The force just now had almost split open the four symbols venerable's head. If it happened again, he couldn't guarantee that the four symbols venerable would still be safe and sound. Clearly the enemy wouldn't show any mercy. Tang Jing hurriedly controlled the four symbols venerable and grabbed at the top of his head. Kacha! The warhorse was caught head-on and shattered into pieces. Even the shooting sun arrows fell into the large hand. The general had already flown up and dodged the attack, but the spear's attack didn't decrease in the slightest. The spear pierced through the four symbols venerable's palm. Tang Jing let out a heart-wrenching scream. When he looked down, he saw that his palm was also bleeding profusely. At this moment, he and the four symbols venerable had become one. Injuring the four symbols venerable was injuring him. He endured the pain and slapped down with his other hand. The huge palm immediately enveloped the other party in a shadow. The general hurriedly pulled back his spear, wanting to block the attack. However, the fingers of the injured palm closed and grabbed the spear, making it impossible for the general to pull back his spear to block. Seeing this, the general was shocked. He let go of his spear and raised both his hands to block. However, the strength of the four symbols venerable was ultimately not something he could resist. With a muffled bang, the general was flattened to the ground, leaving behind only fragments. Phew! Tang Jing heaved a sigh of relief. However, before he could rejoice, he saw the terracotta soldiers swarming over like a tide. Let's go. The four symbols venerable took large strides and rushed toward the celestial palace. At this moment he couldn't care less about the spiritual energy on the bronze masks. Although the bronze masks were very tempting, they were like thorny roses. The four symbols venerable was extremely fast, and the terracotta soldiers were clearly unable to catch up. In the blink of an eye, they left the densely packed terracotta soldiers behind them. Suddenly Tang Jing listened attentively and frowned. Why is there no movement behind me? He turned his head curiously. He couldn't help but cry out in alarm. He saw that the densely packed terracotta soldiers had actually stopped their pursuit and were looking at him with hollow eyes from afar. What's going on? Why aren't they chasing me? Tang Jing couldn't figure it out and subconsciously looked up. The Celestial Palace. Two huge words appeared above his head. These two words were floating, but there was no sign or anything like that. They just quietly floated above his head. He suddenly realized that he had unknowingly arrived in front of the Celestial Palace. There must be some kind of restriction on the Celestial Palace that prevented the terracotta soldiers from approaching. Since that was the case, there was no need to stay in the four symbols venerable anymore. He and Professor Qi left the four symbols venerable. Professor Qi was reluctant to leave. Although he didn't gain much, this kind of experience was too rare. Professor Qi sighed in disappointment as he watched the four symbols venerable disappear before his eyes. However, in an instant he sucked in a breath of cold air. Then, as if he had been fixed in place, he looked up blankly. What was above his head? Of course, it was the Celestial Palace. Not just the two words Celestial Palace, but the actual Celestial Palace itself. When looking at the Celestial Palace from afar, one would be shocked by its majesty. Now that he was standing at the foot of the Celestial Palace, this feeling was especially strong. It was so shocking that he could barely find words to describe it. Tang Jing's feelings were more or less the same. He saw that the Celestial Palace above his head was endless, as if it really towered into the clouds. Fair-faced flying dragon has already entered the Celestial Palace. Let's follow. Tang Jing said resolutely. There was already no way out for the thousands of soldiers and horses behind them. Moreover, since they were already here, they naturally couldn't just leave without taking a look. Although they knew that there would be danger inside. Knowing that there was a tiger in the mountain, they still walked towards it. The two of them walked over confidently. The Celestial Palace's palace gate was very huge. It was even taller and bigger than the tomb gate. The two of them arrived in front of the palace gate. There was actually a corpse in front of the palace gate. Second brother Wu. The two of them recognized the corpse at the same time. Wasn't this the second brother Wu who had escaped without a trace? They didn't expect that he would actually escape to the front of the palace gate, but in the end he didn't survive. Grave robbers deserve to die. Professor Qi sighed. Ignoring second brother Wu, the two of them focused on the palace gate. The palace gate was tightly shut. Tang Jing pushed with both hands, but the gate didn't move an inch. His expression changed slightly as he sighed faintly. Professor Qi, we can only rely on you. Since Professor Qi could open the tomb gate, then perhaps he could also open the palace gate. Professor Qi walked forward and said while surveying, Fair-faced flying dragon is much earlier than us. Could it be that he has already entered? He's so familiar with this place. It wouldn't be strange if he had already entered. Tang Jing said indifferently. Just who is this person? Professor Qi was also very curious. Tang Jing shook his head solemnly. This person was too strange. Not only did he know him, but he also wanted to kill him. When did he offend such an expert? How come he didn't know? Only fair-faced flying dragon could answer this question. Perhaps they would meet again in the Celestial Palace later on. They would definitely face off against each other, and perhaps it would really be a life-and-death battle. Time passed minute by minute as Professor Qi focused on studying the palace gate. Tang Jing was bored to death and focused on observing the surroundings. The ancient tomb was originally quite dark, but it seemed that the stars in the sky were sprinkling down starlight, making the place much brighter than the altar. It was like the first glimmer of dawn. In short, the celestial palace's majestic silhouette could be clearly seen. Crack. Suddenly, a strange sound interrupted Tang Zheng's thoughts. He saw the celestial palace's gate open little by little. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. It was a wise move to bring Professor Qi with him. Otherwise he would have entered the celestial palace no matter what. The palace gate opened wide. Tang Zheng and Professor Qi looked at each other excitedly and cautiously walked in. The interior of the celestial palace was as bright as day. As soon as they entered, they saw majestic terracotta soldiers standing on both sides. However, the yin energy on these terracotta soldiers wasn't dense enough. They hadn't come back to life. Tang Zheng and Professor Qi's hearts were in their throats. If these terracotta soldiers came back to life and attacked, the two of them would have offended them. After passing through the long corridor, the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. There were pavilions, small bridges, flowing water, fake mountains and lakes. It really did look like a magnificent palace. The two of them smacked their lips and exclaimed, "The celestial palace really lives up to its name. It was built according to ancient palaces." Professor Qi's eyes were rolling. He almost couldn't see. His mouth was wide open and dazzled. He was so happy that he almost fainted. This kind of spectacle was hard to come by in a lifetime. He felt that he was really lucky to be blessed by the heavens to be able to see such a scene in his lifetime. This palace is in the style of the pre-Qin dynasty. This is really the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. Professor Qi came to this conclusion while trembling. The two of them went around the exquisite pavilions and went deep into the celestial palace. A tall staircase was placed in front of them. The staircase seemed to have no end, as if it extended into the sky. Tang Zheng subconsciously thought of the staircase to heaven. Perhaps this was the feeling that it gave people in the beginning. It went straight up into the sky. The two of them began a long journey to conquer these stairs. Professor Qi was panting like a cow and almost couldn't climb. He had to rely on Tang Zheng's support to finally reach the top. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.